welcome everybody. We only have one item on the agenda today, which is the re-regulation of scooters, those marvellous ways of getting around the city, which have turned up the last couple of years. And as I understand it, provide 1 million rides a year, which is quite an impressive amount when you consider that the buses have been around for 100 years and they only provide 15 times as many trips. But anyhow, to start with the karakia, so just so you know where I'm coming from. And we've got a few late people. Oh no, there are a few. Welina will come to that in a minute. So, whakatihao tiki uru, whakatihao ki te tonga,
kia ma kina kia uta, kia ma tarata ki te ai, e aki hatakura,
ti hao, ti haua, ti hao, ti hai, ore ora. Thank you for covering up for my inadequacies there. So we have a couple of apologies. I think we have Councillor Young and O'Neill, who are both a bit late this morning, but they are all intending to turn up at some point in time to vote. And we have several councillors who are online, but they're not apologies, obviously. We have to pass a motion to accept their apologies, so I hope you'll all accept their apologies, especially Nicholas. No. Oh, sorry. And Rebecca has generously offered the second, but she's also willing to apologise on behalf of Nicholas.
Yeah, I apologise every time.
Are the online guys? So we've got Tori and Sarah are the two tardy voters. What do we do? We don't. Oh, just Sarah. Okay. Thank you. That's all passed. Does anybody have any conflicts of interest? No? Okay. And confirmation of the minutes of the last meeting. So I move that motion and Rebecca is seconding it, so we can vote on that one, please. And can somebody keep those scooters quiet in the back row, please? I'll get it. John, Laurie, Sarah, still waiting for you to vote. Okay, Nico, are you out there somewhere? Are you going to vote? Or is... Okay, so yes, we'll give Nico a green. That's carried. So we have no items which aren't on the agenda, and now we have public participation. And just for all of you who are of the public who are participating today, I think everybody gets 10 minutes, but that includes Q&A time. So it's up to you whether you want to give us an opportunity to ask you questions. And we start with Frederick Conqueror of Ride Beam.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Frederick toko ingoa, he pautaiao ahau I Beam. Hi
Chair and the committee. I'm Frederick, the Sustainability and Policy Manager at Beam. I'm joined here by Jackson, our Operations Manager. We're a proud operator of Wellington's micromobility scheme and grateful for our partnership with Council. As kaitiaki guardians, it is our role to manage the safety of shared e-scooter users while ensuring the safety, accessibility and amenity of pedestrians in Wellington. We are part of the wider Beam Mobility Group, thank you, operating in 8 cities across New Zealand and 100 globally. Our focus is on local operations underpinned by global expertise. We bring the best to New Zealand with a tailored service unique to the needs of Wellington. We want to acknowledge the work of the Pāniki Poniki and Te Atakura plans and Council's focus on sustainable transport. We see our role in the system as to help activate these plans. We support the proposed Code of Practice changes to continue the momentum being built over the last 3 years, poised for future rider growth and growth of active and shared transport in the city. We are committed to Wellington and work is underway to meet the new requirements. In particular, we've audited 37,000 photos in the last 3 months alone. This represents 97% of trips in the last month in high foot traffic areas in central Wellington. We've consistently delivered an average response time to any complaints or parking requests in under 45 minutes. And we also support increased fees to fund infrastructure. Regarding accessibility, we deliver more as a service provider. We're always innovating, always pioneering and bringing new technology. Our new vehicles bring significantly better GPS and control for the council. We recognise the gender gap in cycling and scooter riding and have already been delivered a new bike for Wellington. This has been designed from the ground up to be more accessible, supporting a wider range of riders and trips all around the city. This is more riders, more trips, growing the overall system. The bike, as you see to my right, is a smaller but still legal adult bike that is allowed to be able to run around bike lanes and the roads around the city. Safety has always been paramount to Beam. We pioneered new tech such as helmet locks and helmets on every vehicle 3 years ago and are always continually bringing the best of the world's tech to Wellington. We design our vehicles to take up a minimum amount of space, whether they're ridden or parked, acknowledging this precious resource in our city. We also deliver accessibility by providing subsidised passes and concessions, with over 30% of our riders in total and a greater percentage of the number of trips using these passes. On sustainability, we improve Wellington's transport sustainability emissions by providing transport choices to all Wellingtonians. We replace car trips and connecting the city with last mile connections with public transport. Beam's local team, as shown in the picture in the middle below, we manage our fleet carefully with cargo bikes and our own electric vans. This helps us deliver on KPIs with council, such as we haven't had a single vehicle in the water in 2024 at all. We're always bringing new tech and refreshing our fleet. Our previous fleet is managed through our Second Life program, either sold as another affordable option to Wellingtonians or leased out to consumers, corporate and public sector customers, reducing taxis, pool cars and company cars. I'll now hand you over to Jackson.
Kia ora. My name is Jackson. I'm the Operations Manager for Beam based in Wellington. I'm here to talk about rider parking and footpath riding along Golden Mile and to share how we are using new technology to increase the sense of safety and security for pedestrians. In regards to rider parking, Beam addresses improper rider parking in several ways, educating riders on correct parking methods, correcting badly parked e-scooters, and enforcing rider behavior via our 3 strikes policy, which issues warnings and suspensions to recurring offenders. However, in key inner city areas of Wellington, which experience higher trip numbers due to both vehicle and rider density, we identified that additional investment was required to maintain city amenity. With 37,000 end trips across high foot traffic areas in the CBD being audited, these results are uploaded to form the base of our new Parking Auditor AI module. This AI module will then be able to recognize good and bad parking and be able to give real-time feedback to riders and stopping them from parking badly. Using the images from local auditing improves the detection accuracy to a higher level. We are focusing on improving parked scooters in 3 ways: training riders in the app and at safety training events that we hold across Wellington around the year, giving feedback to riders through the app using real-time technology and with the auditing technology. If we encounter an issue with whether through the auditor or through a note from the public, our priority is to resolve these as soon as possible. At any given point of time, we have a minimum of 3 team members working on the field, which helps us to act quickly to any concerns raised. The usage of on-street parking for shared mobility introduced by Wellington City Council has been significant, and we support this initiative to grow and expand more in CBD. The next is the new tech pedestrian shield that we have developed and are running in Wellington currently. Beam's pedestrian shield is an advanced AI-powered path detection technology capable of detecting city infrastructures like roads or footpaths in real time using an onboard camera. With this technology, Beam is setting the market pace regarding real-time rider education and enforcement capabilities. With Pedestrian Shield, our e-scooters can accurately and reliably identify whether the vehicle is traveling on footpaths, roads, or bike lanes to account for the differing restrictions on each. Pedestrian Shield is also able to guide riders onto allowed paths and roads and educate riders on any path-specific speed limitations via real-time audio alerts. This allows for customized education and real-time enforcement to riders based on riding rules specific to our city. For example, any rider attempting to ride on the Golden Mile footpath will be alerted to the riding rules in real time with this audio.
Riding on the footpaths is not allowed. Please ride on the road.
Utilizing Pedestrian Shield, Beam is able to provide Wellington with real-time data about riders' interactions with active transport infrastructure. The ability to map rider journeys to greater detail, including their choice between footpath, bike lanes, and roads, allows policymakers and transport planners to identify popular active transport routes and potential new routes for bike lanes and shared paths. We have invested 7 months in training our AI tech to achieve an accuracy of 99% in detecting different surface types across our city. Currently, 25% of our fleet in Wellington is equipped with the Pedestrian Shield technology, and we commit to scaling this to 100% over the coming months. For every Beam trip taken over the last 3 years, Beam has invested $4 in the community. We are committed to Wellington City, grateful for the last 3 years, and hopeful to be long-time partners in delivering safe and sustainable transport options in Wellington. Thank you, and we are open for questions now.
Sure. Councillor Randall first. Oh, sorry, I thought you said you...
Really, just on the GPS, the improved GPS, does that mean that we'll be able to do things like restrict scooters along the Golden Mile section and things like that?
Yes, so with our technology, we're able to detect the footpath versus the road. So the moment a scooter goes onto that footpath, we're able to slow down and stop the vehicle.
Okay.
Councillor Pannett.
Thanks for coming in. Can you just sort of outline how you think this will eventually be able to lead to reduced emissions, because the review doesn't really show that, and also whether your business model is possible without the use of pavements? Thank you.
So reduced emissions come about through further trips. So the growth of trips in the profile means that every scooter which is already carbon neutral is more sustainable. We're also improving the way we run our scooters from an efficiency perspective. So the more efficient we are in terms of our operations reduces our carbon profile entirely.
Your business model, is it viable without the pavements?
Yeah, we're open to changes in pavement use, but in Australia we do see some areas have different rules and regulations, but we follow the rules for different local authorities in Waka Kotahi.
Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much. My two main concerns regarding e-bikes and e-scooters are where they're actually parked, because I often see them across footpaths, blocking them off, and so I'm keen to sort of see what you're doing to actually remove those or relocate them as soon as possible. And the second one is rider behaviour, where people ride between people when on the footpath, between pedestrians, and ride through red lights and other issues like that.
So we're really focused on rider safety as well. So in our app, we're able to now detect both aggressive riding and dangerous riding. So we can see what riders are doing and be able to make adjustments in real time. This is also done through feedback as well from our own staff when we get in contact to riders. In terms of rebalancing and moving scooters around, we're also highly focused with our local team. So we've got people out and about every day, and we're also managing the fleet. So when we do see issues, we're able to respond in real time.
Last question, Councillor Foon.
Thank you. Just two very quick questions. What is the average life cycle time of each scooter? And the second question, are you aware of Councillor Brown's amendments? And are you prepared to carry on working with WCC on the code that we're putting in, if that goes through?
Yeah. Our vehicles are designed with a minimum 5-year lifespan. Right. So as I said, the vehicles from 3 years ago, they're still running. You'll still see them around. Generally, we're using them to lease to businesses and community groups, as well as we do sell them on as well into the local market to be able to continue their life. We do that because we're always trying to invest in new technology, and the older scooters do need to go. We also use them in other cities around the country.
Yep.
We are aware of the amendment. We would like to continue in partnership with Council and continue to invest in the city and build rider growth over the next few years.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. And our next speaker is Nick Highland of Flamingo. Keep an eye on you, so you're right down here.
If we could get some flamingo-looking slides up, that would be awesome.
Go. Yep. Sorry. Are we waiting? Oh, right.
There we go. Kia ora koutou katoa. My name is Jackson, this is Nick and Trish, and we're from Flamingo, the proudly Kiwi-owned and operated electric scooter and bike sharing company that was founded right here in Portneki, Wellington. Flamingo began when Nick and I met at Wellington's Creative HQ Business Accelerator program, and Trish chairs the Flamingo board. Our mission is to safely provide a transport option that lowers carbon emissions, reduces reliance on cars, and provides a first and last mile connection with public transport. In a recent rider survey, 73% of riders agreed that electric scooter and bike sharing in Wellington makes it easier for them to not own a personal motor vehicle. And a further 62% agreed that it helps them decrease how often they travel by motor vehicle. These statistics provide compelling evidence that Flamingo is significantly reducing car reliance in Wellington. Almost 60% of respondents had made trips that they would not have otherwise made without Flamingo. This demonstrates how we create a transport system that supports the local economy by increasing mobilisation and generating economic activity. We partner closely and collaboratively with Wellington City Council and are passionate about the success of micromobility in our city. We believe it is the way of the future and will do everything we can to ensure its ongoing success. This is why we have a number of safety measures and initiatives to ensure the highest level of safety, and in particular that all scooters and bikes are parked safely. Preferred parking zones are where riders are incentivised to park in tidy and designated areas. Comprehensive in-app rider training includes rules to ensure scooters and bikes are parked and ridden in a safe and respectful manner. Our safety reward program has more detailed and specific safety rules, including training modules on safe parking. We regularly host Learn to Ride safety events to teach people firsthand how to safely ride and park scooters and bikes in Wellington. Just 2 weeks ago, we partnered with Kiwi Class to run a Learn to Ride event with translated safety instructions for refugees and migrants new to New Zealand. Onboard GPS allows us to enforce geofence no riding, no parking and low speed zones in areas such as those with high foot traffic, like the Golden Mile and Cuba Street. In addition to Council, we collaborate with the wider community to create and enforce safety zones and have approximately 140 of these zones across Wellington. For tip detection, onboard sensors detect when scooters and bikes fall over. Our rapid response team are alerted and respond promptly. All users are required to take parking photos, which are reviewed by our customer support team. Our in-field safety ambassadors also complete parking reviews. When they find a scooter or bike parked improperly, they capture a photo using Flamingo's admin app. This photo is emailed to the rider, and the scooter or bike is relocated without delay. Riders who demonstrate good parking behaviour receive incentives such as discounts on their next ride, whereas users who are found to be parking in an unsafe manner first receive an email warning, followed by a phone call. Users who continue to violate these rules receive fines and have their accounts suspended or completely disabled depending on the severity. In the past 2 years, Flamingo alone has issued over 40,000 email warnings, had phone conversations with over 1,100 riders, fined over 400, suspended 29 riders, and had to completely ban just 11. We believe these statistics provide compelling evidence that this education-based escalation process is effective, and the vast majority of riders demonstrate improved parking after the first contact. Flamingo rapid responders are available at all hours and attend to urgent reports of incorrectly parked scooters and bikes within 30 minutes. We receive reports either directly or they are referred to us by Council, and we are fully integrated with Council's Fix It app. Scooters and bikes can be rolled with ease and lifted when needed urgently or in an emergency. For increased ease, our customer support team remotely unlocks scooters and bikes requiring urgent relocation when residents call our 0800 number, which is simply 0800 Flamingo. Our safety commitment includes significant investment in pedestrian and footpath detection technology for our scooters. Onboard cameras detect pedestrians in the scooter's field of view and automatically sound a bell and slow down when approaching pedestrians. The camera also flags scooters parked into restricted areas such as the Golden Mile. Our AI technology detects when scooters or bikes block the footpath in a rider's parking photo, and we then relocate it. These ongoing developments are aimed at enhancing pedestrian safety and contribute valuable data for ongoing tender decisions. We strongly encourage Council to extend current licences by 2 years to allow for the Code of Practice to be established before re-tendering for a period of 5 years. This approach accelerates the implementation of these pedestrian safety solutions, bypassing the longer lead time new operators would face to become operational and meet Code of Practice requirements. A minimum 2-year extension followed by a 5-year licence term enables operators to continue to make substantial investment in ongoing hardware, technology and community initiatives rather than opting for a shorter time period. A longer licence duration fosters deeper integration and longer-term benefits for our city. It is also relevant that the scooters and bikes in Wellington have a useful life of at least 5 years and are far from reaching the end of their operational capabilities. Extending current licences for a minimum of 2 years promotes sustainability by avoiding the environmental costs of introducing new operators, including energy consumption for manufacturing and freight of new scooters and bikes, and increased vehicle emissions during the transition period. It also provides economic stability for operators and our employees. safeguarding jobs and livelihoods in our city during an uncertain time. Our investment in scooters and bikes can be recovered if existing licences are extended by at least 2 years, especially considering the e-bike trial's relatively short duration. Current operators consistently uphold high parking and pedestrian safety standards. Control measures such as our targeted monitoring and restriction of unsafe riders have resulted in notably tidier parking compared with other New Zealand cities. Losing this valuable knowledge and control would pose a significant risk if operators changed, allowing unsafe riders to sign up with new operators and compromise pedestrian safety. As a Kiwi-owned company, we proudly contribute to local employment through our dedicated and committed team of Wellingtonians. We are invested in Wellington, proud of our collaborative partnership with Council, and will do everything we can to ensure the ongoing success of micromobility in our city. Thank you so much for listening. I now welcome any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Free.
Yeah, thank you. Can you outline for us the process that your company uses to collect scooters and relocate them at the end of the day?
Sure. So yeah, we also use a fleet of fully electric vans and also our own scooters to attend to our scooters throughout the day, so swapping the batteries, and then we have dedicated rebalancing, so moving them back to places where the community wants them the most, all using fully electric vehicles.
Thank you.
In the absence of any other questions, I've got, one. It does seem to me that demand has flatlined, and also there's this significant gender imbalance that Beam spoke of. Are you doing anything to increase demand and in particular stimulate use amongst females?
Absolutely, yeah. So we have ongoing, really dedicated to marketing strategies and other community access plans. So we have a community discount plan that provides a 50% discount for students and people on low incomes, as well as retirees. So that's anyone with a student ID, Super Gold card, a community services card, or a WCC leisure card. We have strong partnerships with universities, and in particular, and looking at tying into other events throughout the city. So huge community focus, relationships are very important in generating further demand. I think, one thing that's been suggested in the paper is increasing the number of scooters. We do need more scooters to be able to expand that demand further and reach further people. We are limited by the number that we're allowed to operate, so that's part of the reason that demand, is sort of restricted to a certain extent.
Sorry, Councillor Calvert. Oh, you didn't have a question. Okay, Councillor Pannett.
Thank you. Just the same question. Does your business model rely on the easy access to pavements?
Yeah, so in every market that we operate, we need to follow the regulatory framework that's in place. So in line with Waka Kotahi's legislation, at the moment, scooters are permitted to be ridden on both footpaths and roads. And because that's always been the way for Flamingo, we believe that is a safe place for riders as well. So, beginner riders, if they were forced onto the road, it would potentially lead to unsafe outcomes for those that aren't quite comfortable.
No, it's for cycle lanes. I'd rather they're on cycle lanes.
Absolutely. We fully support scooters being used in cycle lanes. Yeah.
So I've just got time for one more question. We'll give it to Councillor Chang.
Great, thanks, Jackson. You were saying that you have a target of 30 minutes from when you receive a call to move a cycle that's or a scooter that's parked inconsiderately. How often do you actually reach this target?
We're actually really, really good at reaching that target. I think over the last few months, that's always happened, 90% of the time I'd say it's happened in 30 minutes, and 100% of the time it's happened within 45 minutes. I believe last month our average response time for the ones that come through council specifically, so the ones that come through the Fix-It app, was actually 9 minutes. So that's because we do have team members on the ground available at all times, and when those high priority urgent reports come through, we pretty much drop everything. That's our top priority. Those are the scooters that need to be attended to the quickest.
Excellent, thank you.
Great, thank you very much, guys. That's very impressive. Patrick Morgan of Cycle Wellington is next. Patrick.
Good morning and kia ora. I'm Patrick Morgan, representing Cycle Wellington. Thank you for your attention to this important matter. This is really part of how our city is developing. There's nothing, scooters and e-bikes are not going to go away, they're here to stay. So my key messages to you are, let's manage these better rather than seek to ban. Cycle Wellington supports the advice in the paper before you, and our preference is option 1, to raise the cap. Interesting to hear other submitters talking about possibly rolling over the licences. I can see the merits in that too. So scooters and bikes are here to stay, and I'm really pleased to hear about the code of practice which seeks to address footpath issues. I share those concerns. People should be able to walk freely on footpaths without being impaired by other things there. But let's take a little bit of perspective here. Here's a list of some of the things we encounter every day on our footpaths. Cars that are parked, cars that are moving, street furniture, trees, rubbish bins, bicycles, dogs on leads, recycling and rubbish bins, deliveries and trees. These are all things we find today on footpaths, and it's the job of the council is to manage footpaths so that they work properly for everyone. Scooters do add an additional thing on footpaths, so let's manage that properly. Really good to hear the operators talk about pedestrian shield, their response times, and improved GPS. They're the kind of things I would like to see more of from the operators in managing those risks. Let me see. I'd also note too that in a time of economic distress, these schemes are a jobs engine. I think each operator has around 30 or 40 employees. Why would you want to knock a new enterprise on the head at this point? And that's also why I'd like to see growth in the sector of both e-scooters and bikes. You could adjust the licensing fees. I think the operators would just have to pass those fees on to users, which would increase the price of using those devices and possibly throttle back the use. Again, is that what the council wants to achieve here? In terms of scooters and e-bikes on Pāniki-Poneke, that depends on changes at central government, and Cycle Wellington and Cycling Action Network supports a change in the rules to permit scooters on bike lanes. As it happens, we see those things happening already. I'm not sure police or council ever have the resources to enforce. It's really a paper ban. I think it's already people are seeing that the Pāniki-Poneke bike network is a sensible place for e-scooters. Just a few questions. I tuned into your workshop the other week, and there are a few questions about the small wheels on bikes and scooters. For a bicycle to be legal on footpaths, it has to have tiny wheels. I think 355 millimetres. It's the kind of bicycle a 4-year-old would ride. The e-bikes you've seen here have a larger wheel than that. So, yeah. Also, I think this high public support is pointed out in your paper that a survey conducted in 2023 shows there's support for the continuation of public shared micromobility, with 55% of non-riders and 86% of riders agreeing the council should allow to continue e-scooters in the city. So just in closing, before time for questions, Cycle Wellington recommends that you support the advice in the paper. Our preferred option is option 1, to continue and expand the scheme. I also take the points of operators too, that allowing a longer licence or a rollover in licence permits them to keep investing rather than introducing a new operator who has to get up to speed with the code of compliance and the way Wellington works. So I think there's probably some merit in that, and I look forward to your discussion and questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. First question is from Councillor Pannett.
Thank you for coming in. Can I just clarify your position on footpaths working for everyone? Because would have thought pedestrians are at the top of the hierarchy, so how does that work for everyone? Also, there was a typo. It's actually 51% of non-users support them. So what do you say to the other 49%? And of course, that 51 might not have liked them on the pavement. It's just, you know, where they go. That might be a different issue.
Sure. So I agree, and I think you'll hear from others submitting today that footpaths are primarily for people on foot and mobility disability devices. I totally agree. I also think we need to provide a degree of scrutiny and perspective. I really wish this council provided the same degree of scrutiny to other vehicles we see on our streets, namely motor vehicles and of course bicycles. I wish we spent half a day talking about parking on footpaths by motor vehicles, couriers illegally parking, and I think maybe the council's parking enforcement people could maybe take some notes from the response times that the operators are providing. In terms of the typo in the paper about support levels, I agree that there are concerns here about footpath use, and my message to councillors are let's seek to manage those better in partnership with the operators rather than, I guess, getting into pearl clutching and seeking to ban something that's here to stay.
Councillor Chung.
Thanks, Patrick. Do you think it's feasible that where there are cycle lanes, that scooters and e-bikes should actually use those and be banned from the footpaths?
I think we need to realise that some people may be a beginner on an e-bike or scooter and not feel safe either on the road or on a busy bike path. I think legalising use on the bike path will go a long way to resolving some of those footpath issues. Of course, we're going to need many more bike paths to achieve those outcomes. So, you know, thank you for your work on that.
Great.
There aren't going to be bike paths on every kilometre of of Wellington streets. So I think we'll continue to see some people who are scared about sharing the road with 50 km/h traffic continue to use footpaths. But also note here too that I think on some streets the speed is throttled back to around 15 km/h. That actually sends a signal to the rider, you're better off on the footpath, because I don't think most people want to ride a 15 km/h scooter on the road. So, yeah, I know it's tempting for councillors to get into the detail of managing geofencing and speed limits. I think your job really is governance here, and, you know, go with your staff advice on managing exactly how the scheme works.
Thanks. I'm getting a lot of complaints from people feeling unsafe on footpaths, people who are walking, and as Councillor Pannett has just said, I believe that pedestrians should be the priority. So I would imagine that I can't see any reason why riding on a bike path would be more dangerous or more, difficult for a e-scooter rider than riding on the footpath, because they're protected from cars, aren't they? Maybe.
Some of our bike paths are protected, plenty of them are paint only. You could also imagine a situation where, for example, a parent is riding with a scooter, maybe the kid's on a small bike, the parent's on a scooter. They may not want to be sharing a relatively narrow bike path that are getting increasingly busy. So in some cases, I think people do prefer to use footpaths.
Great,
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for your question, mate.
Thank you, Patrick. That's it.
Thank you, Councillor.
Oh, sorry. Oh, no, that's it. Yep. Okay. Good. Yep. Thanks very much for that. Adam Murison from ARIO is next, please. And I understand you've got a handout, which we're getting now.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Adam Murison. I am the General Manager of ARIO. producer of Aotearoa's safest and most advanced shared e-scooter. The purpose of my speaking today is to provide support for the proposed procurement of new micromobility licences that would begin September 1st, 2024. This procurement would allow Wellington City Council to explore the next generation of device that is able to address what have been long-standing stubborn challenges of the industry. For example, toppled devices littering the streets. If you take a look at the ARI device here, or the one in front of you on your handout, you'll notice it has 3 wheels as well as a wishbone suspension system. This means that you could tilt the device up to 45 degrees and it'll simply right itself, which is about 3 times the topple resistance of a standard 2-wheel device, meaning that accidental topples or weather-based topples will be a thing of the past. Poor parking, in-trip parking by riders, which block access for the pedestrian users. This device has 4 onboard cameras and depth sensors providing a 360-degree view whenever a rider finishes the trip. So firstly, we're not requiring a rider to have to take a photo. We don't have a single photo of a 2D image. We have a 360-degree view, both visually and depth-based. If the scooter determines that the park has not been made within compliance or considerately, an alert goes back to our team in the warehouse immediately, and they can remote into the device and repark it within minutes. Dangerous riding, putting pedestrians at risk. Again, the use of the integrated cameras and depth sensors means that we're able to automatically detect when riders undertaking risky behaviour that put pedestrians at risk. If a rider is seen to be riding too fast or too close to a pedestrian, it's able to slow that rider down and, if needed, stop them. If there is continued poor behaviour by that rider, over time there'll be an escalation going through from education through to suspension and eventually banning of the rider. The most important thing to note that this is all automated. It doesn't require members of the public to A, see it, or B, make a submission to the provider or council. So essentially we'll be moving all of the bad actors off of the platform, or having them adjust their behaviours to what would be far more courteous and what we'd expect to see on our streets. Next, scooters in waterways. This device, if somebody is to try and move it whilst it's when they haven't unlocked it, it will advise the person that their actions are being recorded, which would stop the majority of them. If someone was to continue to try and move the device and throw it into a waterway, our team can remote in and speak to them directly and say, "Sir, in the red jacket, please put the scooter down," which should stop the vast majority. And should a small number persist and throw a device in the water, it's critical to know that we'll have a recording of that, which means we can arrange for a diver to pick the device up immediately. So we will not have what sometimes happens in the industry currently, where a device might be listed down as missing or stolen because there's no visual confirmation that it's actually sitting at the bottom of the harbour. 100% of our devices have this detection. It does mean that we can provide the most advanced surface detection of any device on the market. So in conclusion, we support the procurement because it's an opportunity to engage a provider that can better address those stubborn challenges and produce a safer, more considerate and more sustainable micromobility transport network. Thank you for your consideration.
Thanks for coming in. And look, I think that looks really good for making it safer for the riders. But I would be concerned about the amount of space that it takes up on a footpath. So how do you sort of mediate such a large sort of vehicle with good pedestrian safety?
Great question. I think pedestrian safety is at the centre of what this does. To the first part about the size, The width of this device is no wider than your standard device. It is wider at the bottom because it has the 2 wheels and the suspension system. However, the safety systems that enables provide net benefits for pedestrians. So, for example, it means that we now have a safe stabilizing scooter that's able to be remote piloted and reparked. So at the moment, the biggest challenge you have for pedestrians is that they're parked poorly and they're toppled. This will get toppled far less often, so it's not going to be obstructing access way for pedestrians or people with low vision, for example. If it is parked poorly, we'll know immediately, and we can park it within minutes. So it doesn't require us to be advised that it's parked poorly. We don't have to give you a 30-minute requirement. If someone happens to find one that they don't like how it's parked, and they do call us, we can move it within minutes. We can move it whilst they're on the call. So we're going to make sure that we have much clearer access way for pedestrians. We also have far greater control over where these can be ridden and how they can be ridden. So with that surface detection, we've got 4 cameras on all of our devices, not 1 camera on some of our devices. So all of our devices can have rules set so that in certain areas you are not going to be able to ride in certain ways. Probably the most logical step that I can think of that will benefit pedestrians is we incentivize people to stop riding on the pathway. At the moment, in high pedestrian areas, we put geofences in place that will mean you've got a 15-kilometre speed limit both on the road and in the pathway. So for every scooter that's on the pathway, yes, they're travelling closer to walking speed, which lowers the risk, but those scooters no longer feel safe travelling on the road, so more scooters end up on the pathway. With this level of surface detection, you could say 15 kilometres or even 12 kilometres on the pathway and 25 on the road. So now you're incentivising the scooters to ride on the footpath. So you'll have net less riders on the footpath. The riders that are on the footpath, we can detect at an individual level if they're riding poorly. So if they're riding too close and too dangerously to pedestrians, we slow them down or we kick them off. They keep doing it, we get them off the platform. And again, it's automated. It's not requiring the general public to come to us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, just a couple of background questions. Just have you got any trading experience in Aotearoa so far, and for how long?
Yes, so I'm the ex-regional manager for Neuron. So I launched Neuron across Auckland, Hamilton, Dunedin and Christchurch. I also managed ACT. We've brought on a world-renowned team so far across Lime, Beam and Neuron staff. So our warehouse workshop manager built up and managed the Neuron Brisbane warehouse for the last 5 years. Our ops manager is ex-regional manager for Beam, and all of our designer engineering team are ex-global leaders for Lime.
Cool. So is Ario available now?
Ario is available now. We have the devices in Auckland ready to ship as soon as we get the green light.
But trading, like as in?
No, we currently have a licence pending with 3 city councils.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you, Adam. Just for my fellow members, I had the pleasure of trying out your new device yesterday and having a chat to you. It's impressive, I have to say, and fun. The question I have, though, is, with the improved GPS capability, lots of things are happening. One of the concerns I've come across is people who are rushing through pedestrian areas because they're in a hurry because the charging is time-based. You made the comment that possibly you might be able to offer a different sort of solution on the charging to help, make people be more reasonable.
Yes, so a trial that we're undertaking. So I've tried to focus on the generational shifts between this device and the other ones. One of the iterational differences that we've made, though, is that we've invested in a dual band GPS that's essentially military grade. Now, there's always still limitations with geofences, which is why we use some of those other technologies for things that need a little bit more nuance, like surface detection. However, with GPS, one thing that the increased GPS detection and accuracy, one thing that we are going to be trialling later this year is the ability to charge by distance rather than time. So with the end goal being that somebody going a 2, 3, 4 kilometre trip would get charged the same whether they do it on another provider or us. But if somebody comes up to a red light or a pedestrian in front of them that's moving slowly, they don't feel a sense of anxiety to have to make risky decisions to get past them because they're getting charged X amount per minute. We want them to feel like they can slow down, take their time, enjoy it, and most importantly, be safe.
So thank you. I mean, it's impressive how much in 3-4 years the technology's moved on to what's another generation.
Thank you. So that's your 10 minutes, but actually in a little while, about half an hour, we have our morning tea break, and a number of councillors have said they'd like to look at your machine. So if you are still here for morning tea, that would be handy so that they can have a spin around the... No. Thanks very much.
I'll stick around. Thank you. And I'll also, if you would like to see, I can demonstrate the remote piloting at the same time.
All right. Our next speaker is Elaine Blake of Living Street, Aotea. Aotearoa, I should say, not the island. I can tell you there's not a lot of footpaths on Great Barrier Island.
Kia ora tātou, Tim. It's Ellen Blake. Ko Kaimahi kia Living Streets Aotearoa, the pedestrian advocacy group. We're the specialists in walking and pedestrians. We want great public spaces that people can enjoy, that all people can enjoy. So thanks for the opportunity to come here and talk about this. There was no public consultation, so I'm popped up short notice, which is probably why you won't see other people here speaking for pedestrians from the disability community and such like. The reason why it's not public consultation apparently is because this is being rolled over. It was supposed to be a trial, we've been told, but no, it's not a trial, it's just being rolled over. So that's why we're the only people here speaking from a different point of view. So you probably know that pedestrians include people in wheelchairs, so there's a wide range. How many pedestrians are in Wellington? 215,000. There's 215,000 people that live in Wellington. We all take walking trips, whether that's on foot or in a wheelchair. So every day, Tim, you will be amazed at how many trips are done on foot. So we don't have any comparison in this paper about how the overall picture of people moving around Wellington is happening. So Living Streets Aotearoa wants to see more people walking more often, enjoying public space. We want walking to be safe, pleasant and a joy. And I think Patrick's cleverly outlined why there's a lot of issues on the footpath at the moment. So e-scooters is one more, higher e-bikes are one more. We've had a lot of talk recently about walkability and what that means. So as you all know, that it's not about your personal journey. It's not about how far you think you can walk. It's about creating a walking environment that people will enjoy. It's safe and pleasant and people will find it a joy to walk. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. One of the bottom lines for having a walkable environment is you can have a safe space for pedestrians. It's pedestrian only. We used to have that. It was called a footpath. We've heard that the government changed that approach and let these motor vehicles onto the footpath because they declared them not to be motor vehicles. So this is why we've ended up in this situation where it's left up to the councils to manage this issue. So we want everybody to be able to get out and walk. We want that mode shift. So we talked a little bit in this paper about what the policies are from the council about what we're trying to achieve. So we're trying to achieve mode shift. So that means we're shifting from as far as I understand it, from motor vehicles into the sustainable modes, which is walking is number one, biking and some of those other micro-mobility things, and public transport. Wellington's very big on walking and public transport, so we should and we must be supporting that if we want to see the mode shift. And I know some people like e-scooters and some of this new technology. You know, the technology is changing all the time, and that is just fine. Living Streets is not saying we should ban the new technologies and that. We just want a safe footpath environment, which has got to be vehicle-free. And we want to see the mode shift to the sustainable modes. Now, if you've read this paper, you will have noticed that about half of the trips identified in this paper were for fun. They were for fun. So that is additional vehicle trips. It's not achieving your climate change goals. And from international evidence, I know there's absolutely nothing in this paper to give this context, but from international studies, we know that most e-scooter trips replace walking trips, because even in this paper it says most of the trips are under 2 kilometres, which is about, a 2 kilometre walk's about 24, 25 minutes or whatever, but probably most of the trips will be even less than that. So that is a very walkable trip. Most trips to public transport, Tony will know, are on foot, particularly buses. So we don't need to replace those. Why on earth would we want to replace those? So this is the overall context for what's happening. So we, as a Living Streets, we often get people complaining about things on footpaths. Moving vehicles would be number one. The e-scooters, the bikes, we don't see cars very often driving up and down footpaths because they don't fit, because the footpaths are narrow. So we often hear complaints about e-scooters. It would be one of our biggest complaints. It's obviously not appearing in the statistics that you get. We've heard more from the e-scooter companies just now about their compliance rates than were in the paper. In the paper it said that this is all confidential information, so I just don't know, don't feel confident about some of that information in there. So what was that? So we're not seeing the mode shift that we're supposed to see with introducing new vehicles. The council's spending a lot of time supporting e-scooters. I wish they would spend as much time supporting walking. If you talk to people about e-scooters, then we don't spend time walking. We haven't spent all of this amount of energy on walking at all. If we talk to the disability community, I think you'll find that they are very seriously concerned about this. That this paper downplays their concerns, it downplays our concerns. And there's one of the reasons why was no public consultation, because the significance has been rated as low. How can it be low when all of the companies turn up to talk to you? They knew about this meeting way more than anybody else. How can it be low if the council's meeting them every month? We're spending money on this. So what my suggestions would be is, ideally, we move towards getting e-scooters and other e-things off the footpath. We don't want vehicles on the footpath. Having vehicles on the footpath reduces walkability. So there's some things, like if you're doing your criteria for procurement, I don't see any record of having to show how your safety record around non-users is. So there's no evidence, people don't have to provide that evidence and that criteria for assessment. There's no requirement to provide a record of your compliance with the existing code of practice. We've got 2 e-scooter companies here, only one of them's come up with their data on how they've managed compliance. And we need to know a little bit more clearly what the goals for transport for the Wellington City Council are, because it's not clear. We seem to be supporting e-motor things more than we are supporting walking. So the code of practice has been around for quite a while. It's pretty much the same as it has been, with a couple of new little tweaks. And the requirements on how to park e-scooters is inadequate. I'm going to run out of time, so I beg for some more time, because I would like my colleague here to speak as well. So the requirements for parking is inadequate. There's a thing in there called the continuous accessible path of travel. This is where blind, low vision people will walk, and they're trained with their stick and with their dogs to walk along the property boundary. So I'm sure staff here know this. So that needs to be in the code of practice, that this is the clear area that we have, the 1.8 metre clear minimum area. It should be the same on all footpaths.
Elaine, just to point is that you've only got a couple of minutes to go. You might want to just give us some time for some questions.
Well, I would like to explain my recommendations, and I would just ask for some more time, please, because I noticed that other people had that as well. So I just continue.
But just a couple of extra minutes.
So we recommend that e-scooters are parked off footpaths. You've already heard the beeping and noises that they make. So I just wonder how many people have had that parked outside their house at night. Anybody here? How many people, thank you, how many people have had to walk around e-scooters on the footpath? Yeah, lots of people. So all of these things, you know, most people have had them whizzing past as well. So all of these things mean that we need better control of e-scooters. And I don't think that delegating things to staff shows a sufficient leadership from the council on this matter. It's a significant issue, having vehicles on footpaths. So we've already heard from the e-scooter companies that it's very easy for them to do geofencing. Why isn't that in here? And I've just noticed as well that, I'm surprised Patrick didn't talk about it, that e-bikes actually are much more efficient at moving people from motor vehicles. The e-bike schemes internationally have shown to be more efficient for doing that. So that's that. And I'll just get Chris to say his bit quickly.
Kia ora koutou. Ko Chris Horn aho. I have been a member of Living Streets Aotearoa for many years. And I am a fairly persistent mover of badly parked e-scooters and e-bikes. I just about worn out one pair of shoes, lifting the damn things to make them parallel to the shop front that they're parked next to. And occasionally I have taken them right across the footpath and put them in the gutter, which I think is where you should consider having them parked. On the subject of terminology, we've heard three words: footpaths, we've heard pavement, and I think there was one other, probably a pathway. Let's just use the word footpath, because that's what is worrying us as pedestrians. We would like to see geofencing of all these e-vehicles, to get them off footpaths full stop, to ensure that we pedestrians, whether well-sighted or not so well-sighted or even blind, can feel safe on what is their terrain. So just to round up, I think that...
Got 1 minute to go, so you might want to leave some time for some questions.
Right. Thank you. Well, I'll finish there. Thank you for the chance to talk to you.
Thank you, Holden.
Thank you both. Just a question, Alan, you mentioned something about confidential information, and I was a bit confused because the two providers have been very open with their data, and the paper itself is quite clear around the data. So could you kind of explain what you mean?
The paper didn't say that the 11 people had been banned or suspended. So this is the kind of information you need to know to ensure that the code of compliance is being met. There isn't that level of detail in that report.
Okay, thank you.
Iota?
Sorry, just a quick question. Some people are concerned that if we lower the speeds geofence to 15k, that it will encourage more people on scooters to go on the footpath rather than going on the road. Do you accept that?
I've just heard from the REO people and that from the other companies that they can do good geofencing. I think there's every reason to expect a low speed on the footpath of 8 kilometres per hour. That's what mobility scooters go at. And to have, I don't know, whatever the speed is for the road. I mean, most of the inner city is 30 kilometres an hour, isn't it?
So I've got a question that might going to make myself the last question to ask her. The data shows that there have been 36 complaints over a 30-month period for moving scooters. So we've got one, so the scooter companies have recorded one complaint every 26 days. Now, this sounds like a very low rate of complaints. So I can understand your concerns about stationary scooters impeding the footpath, but the level of complaints about moving scooters seems to indicate that actually people in Wellington are not uncomfortable with them if we're getting them one complaint every 26 days.
I don't think that, I'm not even sure where that complaint's going to. Is it through Fixit or is it through directly to the company? But I don't think the level of complaints is a good measure of how well the city is functioning for pedestrians. We know that people don't complain very much. It's particularly pedestrians. They're very easygoing types. And one of the reasons for when you use Fixit, you have to take a photo. If you try taking a photo of somebody moving at speed on the footpath as they just zoom past you, you try it, Tim, and that's a really good reason. I mean, we shouldn't be expecting the public to be complaining about a private business making money off the public footpath. I mean, that's just completely unfair.
I think you've given us a bit of material which we could ask our officers about at the end of this process. So thank you very much for your submission.
Thank you.
At our next,
please show some leadership.
Thank you. At our next presentation, which has nothing whatsoever to do with scooters, is from Jeff Wishart and Peter Edwards from Transpower. At least I hope it's got nothing to do with scooters, because if these guys are moving stuff with scooters, we've all got something to worry about.
Tēnā koutou. Sorry, tēnā koutou katoa, nā mihi ki nā maunga tāpu ki nā awa tāpu o tēnā o tātou, nā mihi ki nā mana whenua ki Taranaki ki Te Atiawa ki Te Upoko o Te Eka Maui ki Ngāti Toa Rangatira hoki. Ko Jeff Wishart, toka wingoa, ke Transpower Hoi mahi ana. Thank you very much for having us come and talk to you. I'm the principal stakeholder advisor at Transpower, and my colleague here, Peter Edwards, is the project manager on a project about taking and replacing towers on our Newlands to Takapū Road project line with poles. So I'll probably hand over to Peter because he'll discuss the project aspects of that. I can talk about the communications aspects of that. So it's quite a accelerated project, I guess, and that we're looking to have it all completed in about 18 months, over the next 18 months. But I'll allow Peter to introduce himself and talk about it a bit further.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and thank you all for your time this morning. Just a brief history of the assets that we're talking about. The Kandala-Takapū road line was constructed in the 1920s. It was originally constructed to transmit at 110 kV, kilovolts. In the 90s, we decommissioned the Kandala substation and removed structures 1 to 3 on the line, and at that time reconducted the line and reduced the capacity to 33 kV to suit Wellington's needs. The section that we're specifically talking to you about today are structures 7 to 15. Now, they run through the Newlands area. There's a significant amount of underbuild that's occurred since the 1920s, so it provides some challenges for us there. We had a condition assessment done on those assets about 2 years ago, and at the time we were made aware that there was some work that needed to be done prior to us going in and replacing those towers. The tower replacement's been on the cards for some time. And at that time we conducted repairs that our engineers thought that would probably allow us a 3 to 5 year window in which to complete that work. Now in January this year we had another assessment done just to see how the condition was faring, and it was brought to our attention that probably due to the proximity to Wellington Harbour, the towers had deteriorated faster than we'd anticipated. So there's currently some work underway to do some more reinforcement of the towers that are through there at the moment, and we're now in a planning phase to get into the area as soon as we can and replace those towers with poles. The process for that will be we will need to dig new foundations and put concrete foundations in for the new poles. The poles themselves, due to the physical constraints of the area, will come to site in sections and be progressively built with cranes. There will be some disruption for the local community, which we're currently working through our plan for that. The cranes we're going to need are quite large, and some of the roads that we need to work in are cul-de-sacs. So our focus at the moment is really how we can do the work, obviously safely, in a timely fashion, and minimising disruption to the community. So we're very much in the planning phase at the moment. The foundation work, we're hoping to start on some of those sites towards the end of June or July this year. And in terms of starting to erect the poles and remove the towers, we're looking at around about September, October this year, currently just working through designs to place orders for offshore procurement of those.
Thank you very much. Councillor Randall.
So thank you for updating us. Two questions. One is, what communications are you going to have with the local residents? And secondly, in terms of the disruption and noise, I mean, is it going to be a noisy process, or, you know, like some construction sites, or is it, you know, or will most residents, I guess, except immediate neighbours, not really notice? What's your judgment on that?
I can talk to the noise to start with, and then I'll hand over to Jeff to talk about the communications. So we're currently working through that with our local service provider, Ventia. So we're working through the constructability of, and it's going to vary for each site. There's kind of the constraints around the plant and equipment we can use do differ. There will undoubtedly be some noise. We're going to need small excavators to dig out the foundations, and then there'll be concrete trucks likely pumping concrete into those foundations. The cranes themselves, I don't think they're particularly loud, but there will definitely be noise and the details of that we're working through, and we will definitely be engaging with the local community and directly affected residents before we start.
Yeah, so on the communications, yes, so we've written to and spoken to landowners with the assets in and around their properties. So that's started. We have also got a mail drops planned later this month to a wider section of that community that's under the line, if you like, so that telling them actually not only that we're doing the project, but we're running an information day at the Newlands Community Centre on the 22nd and the 25th of May, so into the sort of afternoon, evening for that 22nd, which is the Wednesday, and then on the Saturday running it pretty much all day, just to allow people to come in when they can and just ask questions of our project team about the sort of work and, you know, what the poles will look like and those sorts of things. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I was just interested that you said that the voltage was dropped because there wasn't as much need for supply there.
Well,
how much thinking have you done about the fact we expect that to be a growth area? So how much thinking have you done about the future need for electricity there?
Yeah, thank you. So we've been working with Wellington Electricity around their future needs. So there is scope in the work that we're currently doing to carry out an upgrade to the capacity of the line. Wellington Electricity have indicated to us that the likelihood of them to require 110 kilovolts is very low. The network, I guess, within the Wellington area now is very different to what it was in the 1920s. There are significantly more substations as opposed to simply the one that we had at Kandala. But in terms of the capacity of the line, there are plans, should we need to increase, to reconduct to the line so that we can transmit more megawatts, if you like, to the city, should we need to.
Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, I got more excited than I thought I would be by this. My question is, like, you mentioned sort of the resistance to extreme weather events or natural disasters, but my kind of like engineering brain is looking at it and thinking that that looks like a larger surface area with a smaller base. So sort of how does it mitigate the risk of sort of shear forces or the torque that's applied with the connection to the ground for high winds?
Now that is a good question, and I'm afraid I'm a project manager, not an engineer. And I'm assured that the poles that have been designed for New Zealand conditions. I guess they do have a smaller base, but it's a bolted foundation as opposed to a cast in situ foundation. The poles themselves are very round, so I would say in terms of any wind shear, it's probably going to flow more nicely, if you like, around a pole than it does a tower. And certainly in the high corrosive sort of Wellington Harbour environments, the steel towers, if you like, the salts tend to sit on the undersides of the steels, which doesn't help in terms of corrosion. So the poles should, as the rain washes over them, help reduce that corrosive effect.
That's really interesting. Thank you.
I get the last question. Actually, mine is basically the same as Councillor Rogers, because I was looking at this and thinking it does look less stable, and obviously we can get extremely high winds at Wellington. Having just read a book about the Waihere disaster, what sort of testing does Transpower actually do of this sort of, this sort of gear to make sure that it can withstand extreme weather, given that Wellington is occasionally prone to that?
Yeah, I'd have to defer that to our technical engineering team, I'm afraid. I know there's physical testing done at the factory of the poles themselves, but in terms of how we shear test connections to foundations, we don't have the answer to that, I'm afraid.
If I could just quickly comment, I think we do have actually standards that have increased over time. In fact, one of the interesting aspects of this is that the line that's there now that is built for 110 kilovolts is not actually to the standards that we would do today, if you know what I mean. So and standards have improved, and certainly we mentioned the Waihere storm. I think there were a couple of towers that went down out of the transmission network, and that helped inform a better approach to the way that we did our towers. So you don't hear many of them falling down these days.
Hey, thanks so much for coming in. That's really appreciated. I think that's great that you actually showed that the responsibility to actually report to us what you're up to. So thank you very much.
Not a problem.
Thanks for your time.
Our next speaker is also, I think, have nothing to do with scooters. This is Alistair Duncan, who's going to talk to us about the Anti-AUKUS Coalition.
I'm Alistair Duncan, and shortly my colleague Marie Russell will take you through a PowerPoint. We'd initially wanted to talk to the full council, but you're nearly all here, and ironically today is an important day because it's the eve of Anzac Day. And if ever there was a fruitless activity of military prowess, it was Gallipoli. And it seemed particularly poignant if you're somebody who's unfortunate enough to watch morning television to see that they've lost the army's baggage. Those lead us to come to this committee because environment and infrastructure are the future of this city, and this city has an incredibly proud record in its position of being a leader against the nuclear issue. The coalition is a broad-based group of people of faith, academics, younger people, older people, people who are concerned about our city and our community. So we really appreciate the time. Marie will take you through the presentation, and please, we look forward to questions.
Kia ora koutou. As you can see, have you got these slides on your screens? Yes, good, thank you. So Wellington declared itself nuclear-free on the 14th of April 1982, long time ago. And in fact, it was the first port in New Zealand to declare itself nuclear-free, and I think that was the Harbour Board doing that, but City Council did this in 1982. And there they are in 2012 celebrating 30 years of Wellington being nuclear-free. I don't think that happened a bit later. Actually, would you like to talk to this,
Sure.
Alyssa?
So hopefully you've all heard of AUKUS, but are concerned that there's a military and nuclear pact between 3 countries, not us. Pillar 1, where the Australians mortgage their children's future to buy submarines that'll be out of date should they ever be delivered. But more critically, Pillar 2, a piece of technology, unclear what it is, unclear how much it will cost, unclear whether it will in fact do any dividend that you couldn't get through other technology. This will draw Aotearoa into a military pact. The signals that the government gets from its community, and there can be no more important voice than community, are the next steps. So why would the Wellington City Council be concerned? Well, firstly, it compromises our precious nuclear-free status. People will say all ships won't be allowed in, but actually it's the thin end of the wedge. And there's a risk of ships visits. Something happens offshore, they need to come in here. Public services, of course, already been targeted by foreign military intelligence, as the Inspector General of the SIS invived, and the issue is of costs. This city is seeing the gutting of public services and the flow on there that's going to affect. There always seem to be money for toys for the boys, but also the reputational damage of our tourist industry, and that's money in the bank to this community. What we're asking you to do, we're not asking you to do a lot. We're asking you to reaffirm the commitment, because these things are worth visiting, to refresh that airport sign. And I want to thank Councillor Matthews for tracking it down. I went looking and couldn't find the damn thing. But we also think this is an issue to celebrate. Clean, green, nuclear-free Aotearoa, clean, green, nuclear and AUKUS-free Wellington. And so we'd like you to do some capital investment, not a lot, but some robust, readable signs in those key locations. Cobham Drive, Nauranga Gorge, at the cruise ship berths. People go, oh my God, Mamie, you came to Wellington, it was absolutely wonderful. And they're nuclear-free. I'm going to get the girls to come here next week. I think that was supposed to be an American accent. Let's put it on major council buildings, because again, this is a progressive council that for 30 years has done the right thing, and at council-sponsored events. Not a big ask.
I'd like to talk about this picture, which I don't know the date of. I think probably the late 70s or early 1980s. And you can see lovely Wellington in the background there in the Tinakori Hill behind. Look on the right there, there's a little child peeping over the banner. So my children are of that generation. They grew up in nuclear-free Wellington, nuclear-free New Zealand. But the generation after them don't know about this. And I think it's timely, it's actually a couple of generations after them, it's timely to let those young people know about the nuclear issue. We are still at risk of nuclear war in the world. It's pretty scary. And New Zealand took this fabulous stand back in 1987 with the Nuclear-Free Zone and Disarmament and Arms Control Act, 1987. We need to make sure that these young people know about this and are able to defend it. It's really important to our city and our country. So we'll take some questions if you have some.
I think this is interesting and very timely as well, and your suggestion is very clear, hopefully practical at council level. My question is, you talked about risk of ships visits in case of the things go through. Do you think the council can do anything about that?
I think council can work within the frameworks of the current law to point out the contradictions to those elements of the government which are looking favourably to this. And you'll see that there's a drift. There's the Labour Party, which was in support of this last year, appears now to be changing its mind. And you have to wonder if Richard Prebble, Don Brash and Helen Clark agree on something, there must be some pretty common ground.
And Jim Bolger.
And Jim.
Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much. Appreciate you coming in and talking to us about this, but you point out a couple of things, like a foreign country was actually targeting New Zealand for our internet, and of course you know that was China. It wasn't anyone belonging to AUKUS. And don't you think that belonging to a consortium of countries that are looking after our freedom and trying to protect us from whatever enemies we may have, don't you think that's a good thing?
If you look at every war on every memorial in every community, including mine on Brooklyn, you'll see the sacrifice that New Zealand has made for those same foreign countries and the futility of that war. If you look at a map of the world and put Wellington right in the centre, you'll see that, in fact, the furthest away countries from us are the United States and Britain. Australia next door is a sovereign nation and they've made their decision. But in terms of targeting something that's explicitly aimed at our biggest trading partner, I know if every time I went into the Brooklyn dairy and said nasty things about them, you'd find the trade change dramatically.
Yeah, I just want to comment on Pillar 2 that the government is considering joining. That, I understand, is actually a sharing of technology, and New Zealand companies joining in with that to see what technology we can actually learn and share. So I understand there are net benefits for New Zealand companies to actually join up and share that technology. It's nothing to do with nuclear submarines or nuclear power or nuclear weapons. So I think that, don't you think that New Zealand companies would benefit from sharing technology?
Very unlikely, actually, because the whole point about Pillar 2 is interoperability between the partners, and the software and the hardware is most likely to come from Australia, UK and US. In other words, we're going to have to buy in to the technology they've already got. We're not making our own.
We also, just to remind councillors, we are a member of the Five Eyes Coalition. That technology should be available. This is a bit like the council getting a database and then the company coming along and saying, oh, you've already signed up for a lease to that, but you need to buy the new one. This is very clearly a military alliance, Councillor Chung. My Brooklyn Dairy and Fletcher Challenge are not going to be invited to be part of it.
Councillor Pennant.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just wondering if you've got a broader view on where New Zealand's foreign policy should be sitting at, given the enormous ethical issues facing some regimes around the country, the world at the moment. You know, I'm just curious, just given.
Yes, but we've got 1 minute and 6 seconds.
Well, I'm just curious if we should be having.
Let's have that conversation over morning tea in 10 minutes.
Just interrupted me. Time.
One more. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you, councillors, and thank you, officials.
Got 2 more.
Thank you very much.
We have Franz Preddy from Climate Liberation Aotearoa. Thank you.
And Julian Warmington.
Kia ora koutou katoa. Thanks for hearing from us today. I'm Frank Preddy. This is Julian Warmington, representing Climate Liberation Aotearoa. We're here today to ask you to start counting cruise ship emissions in the city's emission inventory and in our climate reduction plans. So first, I actually want to address the idea that cruise ships bring us some benefits, because in actuality, the exact opposite is the case, like economically. And everything we say today will be backed up by evidence, good statistics, and peer-reviewed academic papers, which we can share the references for. So you might think of a cruise as a luxury experience where passengers are spending a lot of money in our stores and in our restaurants. But according to Otago University tourism professor James Higham, this is actually not the case. Cruise ship passengers actually spend very little discretionary time or discretionary money shopping in local communities, because their time on shore is effectively operated by the cruise ship company. Now, the New Zealand Institute of Economic Research says that most tourist spending is domestic, not international, like from cruise ships. And despite being 9%, and this is the really important statistic, is that despite being 9% of our international tourist numbers, cruise ship passengers actually contribute only 3% of the total international tourist spend. So they're actually dramatically underspending in terms of their contribution to our economy. And underspending is actually baked into the business model, in which cruise ships don't make money on selling their tickets to sail. They actually make money from passengers spending on the cruise itself. So passengers, they'll be dining on board the cruise ships where it isn't benefiting our communities at all. And finally, the industry is actually built on massive tax evasion. So this is widely reported, but this information is from TaxWatch UK, who say that cruise ship companies avoid tax by incorporating in places such as Panama or Liberia, and they pay on average just 0.8% in taxes. So please don't think for a minute that our economy is reliant on or even benefits from the cruise ship industry. And I'm going to Julian, who's going to tell you about why the cruise ship industry has.
The Love Boat. Those of us who grew up in the 70s or 80s watching The Love Boat might have the similar kind of imagination that cruise ships are full of shiny white millionaires walking around our town smiling, spending millions of dollars. But the truth is a lot more odious. It stinks pretty badly. Let's start with the environmental issues. Dr. Inga Smith of Otago University says a cruise ship holiday to New Zealand makes 4 times the greenhouse gas emissions of a holiday flying and staying in hotels. She says, from a climate change perspective, going on a cruise ship is one of the worst holidays you can take. The cruise ship industry is so polluting. People who care about the climate, like us, would actually encourage others to fly instead. And in fact, the parents of an old friend of mine came to visit Wellington last year and told me how they had to fly from the States to Australia to take the cruise ship here anyway. So cruise ships often include flying anyway. Cruise ship trips. They cause other forms of pollution too. The heavy fuel, the bunker oil they burn, puts cancer-causing dust into our air. In terms of small polluting particulates, one cruise ship is the equivalent of 1 million cars on average. It's ultra-fine dust, right? So it's so small it crosses your blood-brain barrier. It's mostly invisible, so out of mind, out of sight, we don't think about it. But the cost we are paying is real. The true cost is paid by people dying from cancer, or at least suffering from serious treatment. All fossil fuels floating through the air we breathe and into the water we drink. The British Medical Journal says fossil fuel pollution kills 5 million people around the world every year. But imagine 1 million more cars poisoning passengers and the Wellington community and our wildlife neighbours too. A peer-reviewed study in the Marine Policy Journal says cruise ships are responsible for 1/4 of all ocean waste, despite there being only 1% of the merchant fleet. This is a problem because our oceans are already under massive pressure from current warming and other industrial greenhouse gas pollution. And hundreds of millions of people, particularly including our neighbours in the Asia-Pacific region, rely on the ocean for their food. Cruise ships are also terrible for workers' rights. According to Angela Temenga, Professor of Tourism at the University of Palmas in Brazil, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, for extremely low pay are normal working conditions on cruise ships. Some of the largest cruise ship companies put workers in conditions described by the European Parliament and human rights organisations as virtual slavery. So, if the Wellington City Council wants to provide professional distance from these floating monstrosities, and clearly it ought to, the least it can do is finally ping the industry for its luxury emissions that pollute and poison us all.
So obviously Wellingtonians really care about our climate impact and our natural environment. We have conservation projects and predator-free projects that we really take a lot of pride in. And all that kind of hard work that everyday Kiwis, everyday people are doing to protect our local spaces is being undermined by the total free pass that cruise ships get to pollute our waters, our skies, and our breathing space. We think that the very least the Wellington City Council can do is count cruise ship emissions within Wellington's total emissions and in our emission reduction plans. The ships are docking in our harbours and their emissions are in our atmosphere, and so they must be accounted for. Otautahi Christchurch is counting cruise ship emissions. If they can do it, we can as well. And we really ought to be leading on this issue as the capital city, not just playing catch-up. So this is the sort of policy that's being picked up around the world already. The EU and the UK have chosen to include emissions from international shipping and aviation, which includes cruise ships, into their trading schemes and targets from 2026, and others will be following shortly. We know that taking action on climate can be difficult, especially when central government is displaying so much hostility towards climate action through their policies, but that's no reason for us not to act. This is the sort of in November this year, the Climate Commission will make recommendations to central government, and they will likely suggest including cruise ship emissions within local targets. And we believe that if councils have already taken this first step, central government will follow suit. This kind of action often starts with local governments leading the way. As the capital city, it should be seen as our duty to lead the charge on climate action.
Thank you very much. We've got a couple of questions. I think we'll start with Councillor Rogers.
Yeah, thank you for bringing up the example of Christchurch. Good to see that it's already happening. I was wondering, do you know about whether they offset those emissions to bring them towards net zero sort of through rates funding, or does it kind of happen through charges on the cruise ships themselves?
I'm not actually sure whether the Christchurch City Council has included emissions in the reduction targets, only in the overall inventory.
Okay, cool.
So I don't know.
All good, thank you.
Councillor Hohaia. Sorry, Pauiwi Hohaia.
Thank you both for that. I'm interested in your thoughts around Zealandia and the relationship that Zealandia has with the cruise ship industry. My understanding is they're quite reliant on that custom from the cruise ships, which is quite ironic given your case. Would you care to comment on that?
Yeah, well, the thing is that Zealandia can be very reliant on tourism, including international and domestic tourism, without necessarily relying on cruise ships specifically. And so I think that the damage that cruise ships are doing, if other forms of tourism were encouraged, such as, regrettably flying tourism or more sustainable tourism, Zealandia would still be making that revenue without having to rely on such a polluting industry.
Yeah, what was it, 3% of the total number of international tourists?
9%.
Okay, 3% of the GDP come from international tourists, right?
Councillor Calvert.
Can I just clarify, are you asking this council just to record emissions from cruise ships, or are you asking this council to consider banning cruise ships?
We wouldn't go as far as to, at this stage. Obviously that would be great if we could ban cruise ships from docking in the harbours, but that's not what we're asking you to do at this point.
Okay, so it's just about, you're just asking us just to record emissions?
Yes.
It would be really good also if we could see, you talked about having evidence, but I didn't really hear any evidence specifically aimed at Wellington. Given that some of the economic factors that Pui Ohio also mentioned. So I would be really keen to see evidence targeted at Wellington and also validated evidence as well, because we do understand that people do research papers, but yeah.
Absolutely,
research papers, that's all.
We've just sent an email through to Wellington City Council with the speech and the references based in it. Happy to send you another one, and with specific information about Wellington, certainly. Sure.
Thank you very much. Sorry, we're out of time for the other questions, but in 10 minutes we'll be having morning tea, and I'm sure you can join us for that. So now we have our very last submission, which is from Martin Hanley from the Newtown Festival. So thank you very much. We're back on the topic of e-scooters.
Waiting for that.
Thank you, Martin.
Kia ora, Cole Martin Hanley aho. I'm here to talk about the flip side of e-scooters, the amazing collegiality and generosity that the Flamingo team have extended since their inception in the direction of our community festival. I first wrote this last year when the licences were being considered. I printed off a few spare copies if people are interested, if you throw that around the table. But the dynamic flexibility in the urban setting is something that we were introduced accidentally, but with the help of Wellington City Council way back in the day when the council was first considering e-scooters, when Lime scooters existed as a trial in the city, and at the point where the contract was awarded for operators in the city, the then Mayor Justin Lester introduced us to Nick Highland of Flamingo, who came on board and completely understood the hard work it is to make a 2-kilometre urban festival happen in what is a busy arterial road and shopping centre through the months of January and February. And every year since then, mid-January to mid-March, we have 4 or 5 e-scooters dropped off to the office, and either a passcode to use our phones as if we've hired them that costs us nothing, or in the case of the last few years, completely unlocked scooters that become like an appendage to our body that we never let go of because they can't be locked and anybody else could ride off on them. And we navigate the suburb doing all the site prep, doing the little meetings with somebody in Rintoul Street who's worried about what will happen for their car park for their disabled flatmate on festival day. We move through the entire back streets of Newtown, not just the festival that you guys might come to on the day, controlling and monitoring the event. And that's dropped us into an amazing territory where we're very safety conscious at Newtown Festival, so part of the induction for all of our young student volunteers who are doing the grunt work of Newtown Festival is if they're going to ride a scooter, they have to wear a crash helmet, which happens to have a flamingo logo on the side of it, and we also make them wear high-vis vests as they use the scooters, and we give them the very strict rules that you do 2-3 kilometres an hour if you're on a footpath, even if it's a suburban footpath in front of houses. Very definitely it's that if you're in amongst the shop verandas. And what happens when we're waiting at pedestrian crossings is the public mistake us for Flamingo staff, and we get the most amazing stories told to us about what a wonderful device they are, and from people of ages that are more like myself in their 60s, who you wouldn't have thought would be the typical Flamingo rider, about the versatility of moving between Newtown and the city on a Flamingo. I've had a student stop me at the traffic lights tell me the story of how he and his student buddies who live in Upper Melrose were Ubering back from Courtney Place one Saturday night, and they did a count and they realised there were 5 of them, and you can't fit 5 people in an Uber. So he scooted home at the same time as his buddies departed in the Uber, and he beat them home to Melrose by 15 minutes because of the ability of the scooters to travel in the road corridor and also to quietly navigate through the pinch points when the traffic banks up. Back to Newtown Festival. The key thing about Nick and his company, which was what prompted us to write the letter, is their community outreach. So yes, they're helping us, but they are also very dedicated to helping the public, and the public who are non-users of the scooters successfully cope with it. At their initiative, we have designated scooter parking at the gates to Newtown Festival. Over the years, we've added designated cycle parking into this, and we've moved it around. But every festival day, they turn up with a bunch of staff, and they, like valet parking at a hotel forecourt, it's valet parking of the scooters, and they push them into a safe parked zone well away from the peak pedestrian traffic. And those are the things that we think are the lesson for the city, that if there were more designated parking spots, just like there's bus stops for buses and there's car share car parks for Mevo and City Hop, if the city were to join in that partnership and make those spaces really obvious, every day it would be useful to have one of those at the beginning or the middle of Newtown. And I'm sure the same thing would be true through the rest of the city. Their staff that curate the parking zone at Newtown Festival also run a training course. So the Pink Flamingo gazebo goes up, and there are between 3 and 4 staff who teach youngsters who are too young to hire them how to ride them, and they build a little safe track in this year it was in St Anne's School, and in other years it's been in one of our closed roads. And so they're basically training the drivers of the future. And I don't think that you guys would necessarily know that, because Flamingo don't shout from the rooftops all of the outreach and supportive stuff they do in the community. In the tales from the suburb, the Duncan of Duncan's clothing company in Green Street, his was the best, I thought, that it was his preferred means of transport from Newtown to anywhere in the city, and particularly to the stadium, because he could go from his workplace and in Newtown right through the congested city to get to an event or game at the stadium, park it on the forecourt, and because lots of other people do the same thing in the designated parking spot on the forecourt, he could pick one up and go home. And like all of us, he's keen to reduce his carbon footprint, and these electric micro-mobility devices are the gateway pathway to that. The number of people I know who began using the hire scooters, who've liked them so much that they've gone on and bought their own scooter that's slightly more lightweight, folds up and fits in the boot of their car, but they learnt the usefulness of it because they had access to a several $1,000 device to understand how the city could be reimagined, and the congestion-free ways of carefully navigating. We have talked about it a great deal in the office, because the other thing that we do is run a disability support agency. Our son is a wheelchair user, and we're very big on keeping footpaths clear of obstructions. We do a great job moving New World supermarket trolleys that accidentally come home to the streets of inner Newtown to safer parking places to make footpaths less cluttered. And this isn't the last little pitch that I'll make today, is that please could the city do much more to promote the ethics of how to park a scooter and how to park a supermarket trolley. They should be on the building edge, aligned with the building or fence, and just remind the world that we've got a duty of care for others who might be pushing a pram or riding a wheelchair or be visually impaired. It's the building zone that the visually impaired with their canes, that's where they expect to touch and find stray objects. They don't expect it at the curb edge. I'm going to stop there in case you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Martin. Are there any questions? Looks like you were incredibly effective at communicating, so you could join us for morning tea, because we are now having morning tea, and we'll start again at 11:30. Thank you.
Are you going to see Rona?
I am.
I might go and just. Okay, I need a coffee.
Yeah, I'm not in a hurry.
Are you?
I'll wait.
Are you all right? 10 minutes.
Wait. Yeah. Like it, mobility scooter story.
Yeah, I'm not. We've got a
That's why they're so, because the pinch points of the traffic lights, if you...
Yeah, I know, but it compromises us because most people don't use scooters.
now going to listen to Paul and Moana and Jess, who are going to introduce the paper and give us an opportunity to ask them about Elaine's accusations that this was an exclusive, Alan's, Jesus, accusations about it being an exclusive process. So,
Councillor Brown, can I just ask that we use more moderate language when talking about submissions and their views? Thank you.
Ball's in your court.
Cool. Well, thank you, councillors. You have the paper in front of you. I don't think I need to do any more recognition. The public participation this morning kind of laid out all of the issues, so happy to go to questions.
Yes, thank you. Now, just because a point was made by one of our submitters that the disability community do need to be involved in, or at least have a chance to have a say in some of the maybe guidelines around the operation of these scooters. And I understand that does happen, but I've asked the chair to actually specifically put in a noting amendment to ensure it does continue to happen.
That's fine.
And I did wonder what you make of the point about people who use canes, and you may not know this, but just to ask, people who use canes, do they tend to use them with reference to an unencumbered line along the boundaries of properties?
Yeah, I'm not an expert, but that is my understanding. Yeah.
In which case, do we think that there might need to be some adjustments to how we're the principles that we're suggesting in relation to parking these scooters?
Again, I think your amendment to continue to work with that disability or accessibility community is a good one, and that is part of that ongoing communication as to where the guidance for where the scooters are left in relation to where that free part of the footpath remains. And
like I've said before, the operators have been very responsive when we've come to talk to them about these kinds of things.
Yeah, I think, thank you, because I think that is probably the biggest concern. My biggest concern is the parking of these things.
Sure.
Yeah.
For other people in front of me, but I'll go. So I guess my questions are about the amended substantive, and just to kind of get any advice about the impact of the change from the amended substantive.
Can you introduce
first, and then maybe get the questions after that, just so we can explain the justification? It's usually what we do.
Well, sure. So in terms of what's being moved, we can definitely make that work. Office's recommendation remains to go out to tender. We do have relationships with scooter providers who aren't our current operators, and we're very cognizant that we've made commitments to them. I think this was going to be happening in March, so we're already a couple of months delayed, but we can make either way work. And we certainly understand the rationale for the proposal to roll the contracts over.
Councillor or Abdurrahman?
I think some of them are really putting into their work or business model the community face into it. Flamingo is a good example, and the testimony from Newtown Festival is example to that as well. Are we doing anything in encouraging those who are doing that to support them, and the rest encouraging to do similar?
Yeah, well, certainly of the offer that they put in through the tender process. So we do ask that they consider Wellington as not just any city, but the city that it is, what value they can add to our community. And certainly we see some quite innovative ideas coming through when we go out for tender, that operators are thinking very seriously about what value they can add to Wellington. So, and you heard an example of that today.
So that's Councillor Randall. Okay. We've heard quite a bit about the innovation that's come about in the last 3 years in e-scooter technology, and had examples put by the different operators and prospective operators. Can you comment on things like, improved GPS and the use of cameras? Does that change the standard in terms of where we can have a code of conduct and have better control in terms of areas that are either speed restricted or maybe prohibited for scooters that we can consider?
So I think it's fair to say, since Paul and I started doing this back in 2019, the technology has advanced like rapidly, and we are the operators that we work with and other scooter companies who aren't currently operating in Wellington do keep in touch with us, so we're well aware of technological advances. There is an expectation from our side, but it's something that's met quite willingly with the operators, that as technology becomes more readily available, we look to deploy it, and we look at how we can get more granular around things like geofencing. And again, if we are to go through a tender process, then that's something where other companies can bring other technologies to the table. And as part of our assessment, we'll have a look at what the offer is from that regard.
So after start again. Over the past 3 years, has the introduction of technology enabled the council to change or update the plans for where scooters go and the control that happens? Is it, because it's one thing to say that operators can innovate, but has innovation occurred during our contract?
Yes, it has. I don't have that level of detail with me at the moment in terms of specific examples that we could use, but certainly in the updated code of practice that we've bought, we have used that experience and the newly available technologies to refine that code of practice.
And just one more question. I note that recently, I'm not sure how recently, e-scooters have now been extended into Tawa, because of their introduction in the Paengawhāwhā. Do you envisage e-scooters going into other suburbs as during this next time period, or was that sort of really done on it's really where they are now is where they're going to be?
I think we're unlikely to see them want to base themselves out of any other suburbs. What we have is we have a cap for Wellington City, and within that cap they can deploy the scooters as they see fit. I don't envisage a lot of that would change. The difference with Tara was of course with Porirua becoming the hub. They wanted to be able to have people ride between Porirua and Tawa, and we just said, well, that's fine, you just have to stay within the Wellington City cap, so that will mean deploying scooters from elsewhere within Wellington City to Tawa. Well, Tara is in Wellington City, but from elsewhere within the city to that particular suburb.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Pennant.
Thanks. Can I just ask whether there are companies that are likely to want to get in now, and are they going to have an issue with the 2-year wait? I read your answer, but it just still does seem a little bit unorthodox.
I imagine there are other scooter companies who'd like the tender to go ahead. I can't speak for them.
And it's absolutely in line with our procurement rules, because it just does give a couple of the companies an edge.
So we have procurement here, and we've been working with them. There is a clear rationale for why we would roll over. Like I said, the officer advice is still to go ahead with the tender. We'd provide a procurement note after this to cover it off, but we have been talking to procurement.
Okay, cool. The cycle network, so I talked to you about that last night. Thank you for your time. I think Paul's going to answer this one. Just how long have we got to go, if all things go well, till we've sort of got a skeleton network over at least a good part of the city?
Cool. Thank you, Councillor. To be aware that in the long-term plan, our focus for the next 3 years is to sort of finish where we're currently at, all those cycleway projects that are in construction, and then take a move towards the central city and integrated bus priority projects. So that's the stuff that's come back to us from Let's Get Wellington Moving. Remembering that actually the central city was a Let's Get Wellington Moving focus for the active modes as well as bus priority. So we're going to see in the short term not much new stuff for the bike network. It's going to be focused on buses with complementary bike facilities there, and then it's not until the later part of the 10-year program that we get back into completing the bike network.
And if I know it can never really be finished, but we've done 34 kilometres in about 3 years, Liam was saying. Yeah. And so how much is kind of the rough ideal, and how far are we away from that?
Within the City Streets program, there was 66 kilometres of network to be rolled out as part of that. So that's the stuff that's now come back to the city. Of course, that included Thornton Quay and the Golden Mile, and those are projects that are now underway.
Okay, cool. Thanks. And just my last question. I just do have a bit of concern around the engagement with the disability community and pedestrians. And the way that's reflected in the paper. So I understand you did have one meeting with Living Streets. Can you just outline any other meetings you had?
So Anna Blomqvist, who's the manager in this area, is on leave this week. So she did answer this question last week. So I'm going to try and accurately. My understanding is she does meet regularly and also with AAG, but we are happy with the amendment that Councillor Free is putting up.
Okay, but so basically it comes down to maybe a regular meeting with Living Streets and then with AAG. That's the level of engagement.
I mean, I'd have to talk to Anna about what she's currently doing, but we're certainly open to
okay, thank you.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. If we were to, if Councillor Brown's amendments go through and we extend the licence, what are the benefits to the team of not going through the procurement process in terms of time savings?
Well, I mean, obviously these processes take time. It will just mean that we'll be doing that in 2 years' time or 18 months or whatever the time frame is that you agree to. It would allow us to take the changes to the code of practice that we're proposing, be made here today and see how they go and to continue to work with the groups that Councillor Panic, Councillor Free were referring to. So there would be benefit in that. But as I said, we've been working through this process with with other operators as well who would like to see the tender go ahead, so that remains council officers' advice.
Great. Councillor Young.
Thank you. Can you just clarify for me or explain to me, what are the rules about the number of people who can go on an e-scooter at one time? Is it just one person? Because I often see people with children on them without helmets, and I wonder whether that's...
So apparently it's one person, so they shouldn't be going on with more than one person.
So can we do anything with the owners of the companies to get them to enforce that? There's a lot of nodding down the back there. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. If you see something like that, you can put a complaint through to the company, and if you give them the time and the location, even if you can't get a picture or see the number, then they can follow that up.
Okay.
But yes, we're very aware of it.
Can I just add something?
Yeah, sure.
Kia ora. I just wanted to add that we have been working really closely with both operators currently, and there was a couple of areas that we were noticing that we were having safety concerns with the public, and so both operators were super responsive and created campaigns specifically to address the certain concerns that we were having. So for example, people riding while on their phone, they created a whole campaign around that. So they are very responsive. So if that was an area that we wanted to work with, both operators have been really responsive so far.
Councillor Rogers.
Kia ora. Yeah, my question was around when we are implementing the code of practice, one of the operators had raised sort of like the speed limits around the waterfront, and they were investigating potential changes to that. How does that information come through to you and then get informed through the sort of code of conduct, code of practice changes?
Have you had comments? I mean, so the waterfront is a perennial issue when it comes to conflict between pedestrians and not just the e-scooters, but also people on bikes. So I'm not aware, and Jess, you can respond, I'm not aware of any direct request to change that. It would be I wouldn't imagine, but we'd have to have a discussion about what that might look like, obviously, and what technology might be able to enable around safety. But generally, we wouldn't want high-speed vehicles on the waterfront mixing with pedestrians.
Cool, thank you.
Councillor Abdulrahman.
Cool. Moana, under the health and safety report, it says 96% of the report is about the how they park the scooter. And is there anything the current providers are trying to address that? And the new one, the one we saw today, the aerial one, it seems they have a new technology to do something on the spot straight away. Is there anything else the current one doing?
I mean, I think both the current operators addressed that in their public participation today, in referring to their response rates where there is inappropriate parking. So, and then of course you had a provider who says they have a product that won't have that issue. I mean, that's just something for councillors to weigh up, but I can only echo what Jess has been saying, which is this has been an ongoing issue, and both operators that we currently have been very responsive and open to new ideas and ways of doing things.
In our current code of conduct, or whatever we call it, do we have kind of obligation for them to report when it comes to recording of safety issues?
Yes.
And Flamingo, they did it, and I didn't hear from the other one.
Yes, they do. So it's a conversation we can have with them about what information could potentially be made public, but we're also very cognizant if we're potentially going into a tender process of not putting a lot of commercial information from the two current providers out in the public domain. But what I can assure you of is that they provide all that information to us on a regular basis, and we have confidence that they're adhering to the code of practice. If we didn't feel that way, then we would have a conversation with them, but that hasn't been necessary so far.
Thank you. Councillor
Chung.
Thanks very much. Do you think that the technology is actually changing in these scooters very, very swiftly? And so a 5-year sort of contract is a significant length of time. So do you think that this would be a disinterment for them to actually adopt this new technology, or do you think that they would still do it because they had this period of time?
I mean, I think our experience so far, again, I'm using the word responsive a lot, has been that they have been very proactive in this space. Of course, if you go to a 3-year term, then that brings that tender process system up earlier versus giving them more certainty and potentially being able to look to invest more because they've got a longer period of time within Wellington. So it's 6 of one, half a dozen really of the other, I think. Obviously, it would reduce the amount of staff time. These are quite involved processes going through a tender like this. So the pros and cons either way, I think, Councillor.
Can I follow up? Just another question is that, are there any other cities in New Zealand that have a longer term than 3 years? Do you know?
I'm not sure. We can probably check that up for you quickly.
That'll be good, thanks.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Councillor Chung beat me to my question, which was similar, but just are we aware of any other councils that are rolling over their terms in a similar way like this?
There's probably the chance to ask the operators. They'll be most informed about what they're doing.
Thank you.
We certainly did a lot of work with Auckland Transport and their models there. We're consistent with our code of practice, mirrors their code of practice, but there are other models being used for how scooters operate. So no fixed term, it's just a different way in which they would operate. Palmerston North is a good example of that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Councillor Free.
I guess I've been a little listening to us speeds, and everyone's concerned about speeds, but I wonder if there's also a point at which a scooter actually isn't safe to ride if it's going too slow, like it won't be stable. And, are we aware of those kind of limits as well?
Yes, that's my understanding. Yes.
Yeah, like 8 kilometres an hour I thought wasn't safe for a bicycle. You were likely to fall off if you really tried to ride at that speed.
Sure. I mean, I'm not sure.
I mean, the same speed limitations apply to the e-bikes, but the e-bikes can be then pedalled faster. So it's just that's the speed on which the assistance cuts out.
Oh, I see.
But the e-bikes can, as long as you can get it going past the gearing, they can go faster.
Yeah.
As all bikes would.
Okay. A delicate balancing act.
Councillor Randall.
Yes, just looking at the speed or the maximum speed, where do our speed limits, as we impose them in the city, fit maybe with some of the other councils? I mean, do other councils have, for example, do they have a maximum 15 kilometre an hour, total, limit on them, or, in terms of just to see where we fit, because we've sort of got a bit of an unlimited amount at the moment, and certainly now that we can possibly get stuff just identified as being on the footpath, whether we could maybe look at having something like that.
I'm sure other cities also have the same limitations. As I said, when we brought this in back in 2019, we were pretty much basing on what Auckland Transport had done, and they had speed limited some of theirs, and I'm confident they still do. Operators will know that better than I will. in talking to both these the current two operators and others in the market, this idea of using cameras to detect where you are within the road space or within the public realm to know whether you're on a carriageway or a footpath, I think that's something we need to explore through our code of practice to be able to then speed differential the footpath from the carriageway. We understand that the GPS, although we hear it's getting better, the high rises throughout Lambton Quay make it really hard to accurately detect where the curb line is, and at that curb line, the difference between being on the footpath or on the carriageway, that wobbles a lot. So we're still not accurate around GPS, but camera technology, I think, is the way we ought to be investigating to move towards.
Thank you.
That looks like all the questions, so thank you very much. Right, so I have my own motion to move here, which is the changes which I think are on the screen. And am I 3 and 4, or is it 3, 4, and 7?
So it's the amended substantive.
Okay, it's the amended substantive, so it's the whole paper here, which Deputy Mayor Food is the seconder, and I think I get a chance to speak to. Yep. So, I mean, I do feel that that we were looking at doing two things at once, which was obviously the new code of practice and implementing that, and the tenders. And my observation of things like the bustrophy was that when you try and do too many things at once, the chances of making mistakes increases. And so introducing the code of practice and giving it a time to bed in and a chance for it to start working would be a better outcome, both in terms of the implementation of that code of practice and the flow-through benefits for other footpath users and users of the scooters, and ultimately would have a more stable regulatory environment that we would then be able to bring to market for competing bids. One other factor which is very much, so I felt it was going to be better for both the users of the scooters and also the other users of the footpath. One other factor which I've also started to think about since listening to one of the submissions is that both of Beam and Flamingo obviously have quite large staffs. They've made a large commitment to Wellington, and it's an unusual situation for council, as I see it, where effectively the relicensing regime effectively kind of disestablishes somebody and throws all those people on the street, which obviously if they are thrown on the street, at least they can escape on a scooter. But I think, which means that I think we have to be extremely conscientious about our exercising of that power. We are in a funny situation where our licensing of a new scooter operator is based entirely on their quality of service provision. It's not based on money. It's not like they're actually paying us for anything. And when I look at the quality of the service and the diligence which both of the existing operators are actually applying to their provision of service, I'm extremely impressed. I mean, I was super impressed with the Flamingo comment that their average fix time for when they're contacted is 9 minutes, and I'd just like to reference Wellington Water's somewhat tardier response time. So, it does seem to me that we've got two businesses here which are working at an incredibly high level of efficiency and are really responding brilliantly to all complaints. And I know that everybody's sort of aware of when a scooter zips past the sort of vague feeling of nervousness, etc. But the fact is there is one complaint every 26 days relating to moving scooters, and we don't know whether those scooters were the licensed ones or unlicensed. And my own personal experience of looking at people is that actually the unlicensed guys are the ones who I sort of worry about the most, because they do seem to have more powerful machines which aren't GPS limited and all the rest of it. So I would actually doubt that the complaints are actually more focused on those organisations. So I felt that the extension and the potential, it's not where we had to do 5 years after the 18-month extension, but the potential to go to 5 years was also desirable, because it seems to me that this is something where it's not just about new technology. It's not just about adding another camera to your scooter or a new brain to your scooter or another wheel to your scooter. It is also having the staff who can actually become more skillful and understand the circumstance of the market. And a longer period of time, actually, I feel creates benefits in that front. So in 18 months' time, if this amendment is accepted, in 18 months, we will then be looking, a new decision by a new council will be made as to whether we actually retender for 3 years or up to 5 years. So that was the rationale. And obviously there were a number of issues that were raised, which I will just mention very briefly about this disability community point. I think the level of communication between the parties is exemplary. But I think that it's great that we've actually put in a clause that requests officers to continue to work with the disability community regarding potential future improvements. So I hope you can support these amendments, because I think it will continue the very good work that we've seen evidence of thus far. Deputy Mayor Foon.
Kia ora, Councillor Brown, and I do want to thank you for the work on this. I think it's quite an innovative way to look at how council works with good business relationships and partners. And I think from what I can see, both Beam and Flamingo have been really good partners to the city on this work. They have been present at many, if not all, council events which are out in the community, helping people with different modes of transport or active transport, moving into active transport. And as Martin Hanley pointed out, also with a very strong community focus. Everything about doing good business is about relationships. And actually that's what our officers are saying they've got in place with these two operators. And I just can't see why we'd wind that back now at a really crucial time where we're really wanting to build an excellent code of practice. So support this and also request that you support it as well, because from a business perspective, if we start flipping on smaller time frames, we're going to constantly be flipping operators, whereas by giving stronger, longer business, we're going to get more solid outcomes in the long run, just business experience. I just want to speak to acknowledge the challenges on space use. I acknowledge, am experiencing both, but I can say that on the bike lanes we are really seeing more usage by scooters, and that's what we want, and that we're accepting different types of vehicles and actually seeing the new three-wheeler one. You know, I mean, it's incredible what is going into our cycle lanes now. So I think that we're creating a culture of respect for all, and those lanes as well is really important. And I'm seeing more scooters being more comfortable in the bike lanes, which is what we want. And just actually back to the procurement point, I do note that my understanding is that Waimakariri Council has also rolled over its licences. Just also regarding safety, really thank the officers for the new code of practice, and I think what we want to be seeing is that the focus should be on how we as a city and how the operators are working on improving that to the best standard together. Thank you.
Councillor. Councillor Pennant.
Thank you. So I guess I'd just like to take it back to first principles, and I've reflected on this quite carefully because I do not want to be a thief of joy. I see some mostly young people having a good time on them around my neighbourhood, and there's enough hardship in the world. So joy is a good thing. And look, in terms of the shared bike scheme in particular, I think that is a really good thing because sometimes you might not want to own a bike, it might be too inconvenient and you don't want to maintain it. But this isn't for me the real issue. The issue is whether they should be on the footpaths or not. And look, we're obviously in a difficult situation. I think most of us would agree that really they should be on a good micro-mobility or a cycle network. But obviously, as we heard from the officer, that's still a few years away, and it is obviously frustrating that we are behind. And I don't see this as an issue of low significance. I think it's significant to the 49% of non-users who don't like this, and also it wasn't clear for the other 51 whether they actually supported the e-scooters on pavements. And it's not my right to speak for the disability community, but I acknowledge that that some work has been done, but I do think that this paper goes too far on the side of mostly young people who are having fun, the 47%, or the pretty small number of people who are using it for transportation, although I do acknowledge at some point hopefully that will increase and we can see more people using these modes. There are lots of cities and countries around the world which have banned them, so obviously Paris famously, I was also looking at Jakarta, Singapore, Bali's looking at it, New York, you're not allowed on the footpaths, and yet we say that it is okay. And part of my issue really is that this does come mostly from California, the tech bros who just basically said, hey, here's some public resources that we can use at very low cost to access for our business. Now, I acknowledge the scooter companies here today, they've been incredibly respectful and I appreciate that. But I am concerned that this public resource, which has literally cost billions and billions of dollars over the whole world, is now being seen as space where basically vehicles, no matter how you define them, they are vehicles, are allowed on here. So I also I found the review incredibly interesting. The use is infrequent, so it's not something that people are kind of going, oh yeah, I'll do this 3 or 4 times a week. For some journeys, they're not actually suitable. I did take an excellent ride to and from Johnsonville this morning on our public transport. It was incredibly efficient, and congratulations to the Regional Council. Sometimes you just need that kind of public transport. And I do accept the argument that it is replacing walking trips, and walking is so incredibly healthy for all of us. So look, I know this is an argument that's been well played, but I did just want to represent some of the people who aren't so comfortable. I don't mind scooters coming at me personally, but I don't like them coming up behind me because they're silent, of course, because they're electric. It's a bit scary, and I am, able-bodied, so and still reasonably youngish. What I have done is I'd like to thank the officers for working with me. I am going to vote in a particular way, but I just wanted to try and make a few improvements. So just basically investigating more areas. So it's just investigating where we can have a 15-kilometre maximum speed. I don't necessarily accept the argument that will encourage more people onto the pavements. I think it's just indicating that, it is a footpath, so the speed needs to be lower than on the road. And I don't also, by the way, accept that the scooterists should be on the road until the roads are safe, because it's just a deeply hostile environment, and we do need to change the way we use our roads. It is already in there, but I actually wanted a docked system, but I was told it was too expensive. So basically just to formalise that we look for more areas for parking, so they're being properly parked, not on our footpaths in the middle, because I've personally seen a lot of bad parking. And look, we've agreed this in 2019, but I'm going to put it up again now. We've got a new minister. This government is working at pace. I would hope that this was not a difficult change to make to this land transport rule, just that the scooters can use bike lanes. I don't think it's an enforcement issue at the moment, but I think it just sends the signal, no, you belong here, you can use it, we're going to look after you, make sure that you're safe, and I think that would be a really positive thing for pedestrians. Kia ora.
Yes. So do we have a seconder? Yes. Okay, Councillor Chung. Why don't you want to come back and answer a couple of questions about this one? Would that be all right? I'll raise the first question. This is about the 15-kilometre, expanding that area. Isn't that something which you're doing already? So is this going to change your behaviour?
So my understanding is the amendment is to look at investigating where there might be other areas where it would be appropriate to reduce the speeds to 15 kilometres an hour, and we're happy to do that. But our advice stands that whilst you would get lower speeds, you would be more likely to see people, particularly those who are not confident users of scooters, on the footpaths. If we were restricted to, even if they were confident, having to go at 15 kilometres an hour on the road corridor, which is at 30 kilometres or 50 kilometres an hour, we'll more likely see those people come up onto the footpath.
Thank you. Councillor Matthews.
Yeah, so with that First Amendment, if that was the case, and that's your advice to us now, I guess I'm kind of asking what would be the point of doing that further work if there are concerns?
So that we're open to discussing parts of the city where people may feel like there would be a less of a likelihood because it might be a low-speed environment anyway in the road corridor. So all we're saying is, yes, look, it's something that we discuss with scooter companies anyway, and we're just open to considering, but I do flag the fact that what we don't want to see is driving an incentive for more people to be on the footpaths.
So that would form part of your advice about where these areas would be?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I agree with the argument that the longer period of time gives a scooter company time to sort of invest more in their operation, and of course, as you mentioned, they employ people, and it's good to give them security of tenure. What I'm wondering is that can we actually look at another company? Like, are we limited to 2 companies in Wellington, or can we actually look at another company? Because I have to admit that I'm actually quite impressed with the new features of this new company. And the 2 things that I'm most concerned about is, of course, where they're parked when people finish their hires, and of course the danger to pedestrians. And as Councillor Panetta said, I don't like them creeping up behind me either. So I think that addresses this new technology addresses those things. So I would actually like to see them come into the mix and perhaps bid for a licence in Wellington, but I wouldn't like them to wait another 2 years. Thanks.
So when we first came through the trial, what we were trying to balance up in terms of the numbers of scooters that we'd have in the city was, and we worked with providers at the time, what's a number that would make it economically viable for them? Because obviously, if we decided we wanted a cap in the city to say this is the number and we're not going to go above it, if you spread that amongst a large number of providers, it doesn't become economically or commercially viable. So what we did was we came up with a cap which we thought would meet roughly the demand. We based that on experience in other cities and said, okay, well, here's the cap, and then we split it between 2 companies because that was the way of keeping it commercially viable in terms of giving them a decent number of scooters to be able to actually operate, whilst limiting the risk of having a lot of clutter of scooters that are on the footpaths that aren't needed because we've got way more out there. So understand what you're saying. That's what a tender process would allow, would be for other companies to bring new technologies to the table. But the way we've operated in Wellington City has been that we operate under that cap. As you'll see, we're recommending that we lift the number of scooters up to 1,000 across the 2 providers, recommending that e-bikes stay about the same. That's based on the demand that we've seen so far. But I think looking back, we can see that we got that balance about right in terms of commercial viability versus not having excess scooters in the city. So that was the rationale. And I think another point that might be useful, and it speaks to one of the points Alan raised around levels of public consultation, is this is a trading in public places licence. It's not usual for us to bring trading in public places licences to you as elected members, but we knew that there would be a high level of public interest in e-scooters. So that's the reason that we are coming to you. That's the reason we came to you regarding the trials. That's the reason we've come back to you regarding a new tender process. It's not the norm for a trading in public places licence, which is a relatively simple thing. So, but we're here because we recognise that level of public interest.
Okay, so do any other cities have, or do other cities just have 2 providers, or are there other cities that have more, 3 providers?
It's a mix. We know that Palmerston North, for example, has no restrictions. Then they go month by month. I think it would be, it's something we can talk to Palmerston North about. That's not the pathway that we've chosen in Wellington. It would, on the glance of it, require a fair bit more staff time in terms of monitoring the trips per day or trip usage rates. But there's a variety of ways that cities have done it, but this is the way that we've done it, particularly based on the very compact urban form we have in Wellington and the desire to make sure that we're not oversupplying the scooters.
Could I ask you a question? about this, Iona's concern about scooters sneaking up on her. I think it was Beam showed that they've actually fitted cameras which are are sensitive to pedestrians. So effectively, the technology is already making the scooters automatically sensitive to pedestrians who are on the footpath. I'm correct on that, is that right? So we're already starting to see technologies providing a solution to the problem that Councillor Panett's kind of concerned about.
Yes, and I think even if we move to a 5-year contract, the providers know that they're going to be held accountable for their performance over the 5 years when it comes up for a tender again. This is not a completely open-ended thing. And as I've said, and if you're a current operator, you're going to be even more in the spotlight when it comes to a tender process in terms of how you've performed in the past. So I think there's always an incentive there for the scooter providers to be doing the best that they can, particularly around accessibility, whether it's a 3-year contract or a 5-year contract.
Thank you. Councillor Randall.
Yes, I just want to follow up on that first part because it's looking at more areas. In terms, it's such a moving target. In terms of technology, now understanding that most of the providers can detect that they're on a footpath versus in a cycle lane. Could it be part of the, and the definition of areas seems to be a bit of a zone thing, but in reality, there's actually a little more nuance than that. You could say, it could be 15 kilometres an hour through this tricky road space, but 8 kilometres an hour through this narrow pedestrian area. And you could, would you be able to interpret this amendment on those terms? Because it's a bit of a slippery slope, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I take your point, Councillor. Thank you. If we look at something like Oriental Parade, that is one of the areas that's restricted to 15 kilometres an hour. With the technology available with the current 2 operators and new operators that will come to the market, we could say that the carriageway goes up to 25 kilometres an hour, but the footpath drops its speed. So this allows us to do that. And I think within this amendment, I think we should be looking at the current geo-fenced areas to pull out the carriageway sections and allow those users to go a little bit quicker on the carriageway. So it encourages them to stay on the road and less being on the footpath. We weren't able to do that when we set the current scheme up, the current code of practice. If the operators we continue to work with, whether it's the existing 2 as per the amendments that we see or go back to tender, we would make that a part of our tendering process. So I'm sure we're able to do that. Whether the wording of the amendment allows us to increase speed, to decrease some of the zones and take the carriageway out of zone, I think we were able to do that anyway. So.
Yes, and I guess also, that's sort of supported by Part 11 as well. So in terms of the fact that e-scooters are technically or legally not allowed on road space. Cycleway space, which is road. It's technically road, though it's not footpath. Yeah. Have I got that right? Yeah. So it's cycle-only road. Let's call it that.
We know what you mean.
I know you wouldn't call it that way, but I'm just trying to get to a point. Yeah. While people, in theory, could be ticketed or prosecuted even for being on that space, that's generally not done. Is that correct?
No, I mean, the issue is that we can't use signage or anything to encourage people to be in the cycleways.
Yeah. But certainly if we got the government to change the rules so that it was more legally compliant, that would be hugely advantageous. And I was also thinking of things such as medical insurance and things like that. If you had an accident and you're deemed an illegal, doing something that was not legal, it might have consequences which we may not even be aware of.
Potentially, and we're happy with the amendment to write to government again asking for this to be changed.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Free.
So, am I understanding correctly that the staff officers are not particularly supportive of of Iona's first amendment because it may actually result in some perverse outcomes that you wouldn't necessarily be able to adjust speeds upwards or downwards in parts where that might be advantageous. So, are you feeling that you would Are you feeling that you are going to do what this amendment is going to try and achieve without having it?
Look, I think we were able to do it anyway. So the amendment asks us to look at more areas where it's appropriate to put the restrictions in place. I was suggesting that while we were doing that, we could also perhaps make it even more clear by removing some. So I'm not sure if that's removing parts of my Oriental Parade example was where I thought all of Oriental Bay is currently geofenced to slow, it is, including the
road.
Carriageway, and I'm suggesting that under this would we, and I'm not sure, maybe we could adjust the wording that would allow us to explicitly increase the speed on the carriageway. And
You mean the actual road or the cycleway?
I'm talking about the road is what I'm talking about there. So that anybody on the road could go faster, and at the moment we weren't able to do that. The same through Ridderford Street. The carriageway in Ridderford Street, the machine slows down as you're going through, but it was intended to catch the footpath riders, not the in-carriageway riders. As technology has moved, I think we could work with you on appropriateness of speeds in different zones.
Can I ask an question? So with the leave of the meeting, we could maybe make that a bit more explicit, that you can remove that perverse incentive for people to want to be on the footpath and give them a speed advantage if they were on the road.
And with that, we could then look to extend, as Councillor Pennett's amendment, to extend the number of footpaths on which that restriction is.
But they're doing that now.
We can do that now.
Do you? Okay, all right.
Okay.
I might have to vote against it.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Thank you, Councillor Free got there before me. Thank you.
Councillor Chung.
Can I just clarify what you just said about looking at Oriental Parade and geofencing Oriental Parade, whether it's roads and the footpath, and Ridderford Street? Because to my mind, the two areas are completely different, because Ridderford Street, the footpaths are actually very narrow and there's a high pedestrian count on them. Oriental Parade, it's a lot wider, so it is possible to get scooters in there and pedestrians to coexist, although that's where I've received the most complaints about scooters being there. So there are two different areas, or two completely different types of areas, I mean.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, I think we're in agreement. When we brought the papers in 2019 to commence micromobility public share scheme in Wellington, remind you, we spent 4.5 hours trying to develop a code of practice, and by amendments we were adding zones to be restricted. Ridderford Street was one that the committee agreed that we would restrict the speeds in front of the hospital for very good reasons, but the intent there was the footpath in front of Ridderford Street. At that time we weren't able to restrict just the footpath, so we have restricted all of Ridderford Street boundary to boundary. So both footpaths and the carriageway by default. I'm suggesting now, as technology has moved, that's an example of where we could continue to have the footpath operating at a slower speed, appropriately at a slower speed, but the road, the carriageway, we could let operators, the users, go a little bit quicker. And I'm suggesting that would also apply to Oriental Bay for very different reasons. Yes, it's a very wide space, but we still don't want the higher speed scooters mixing with pedestrians there.
Councillor Pennant.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to have a discussion about it in terms of making the thing flexible, but the intent of my amendment is to look at slowing. Can I just ask, though, just about the evidence around the safety of a scooterist going along at 40k an hour? That just sounds to me to be a bit dangerous. Is it really safe?
My understanding is the scooters that are currently available to us won't do 40 kilometres an hour.
Or 30?
They're more like 30 or less.
So then,
so
would
the
you
ones
allow?
I ride, I can't get it to 30.
Okay, so are you saying then we could look at making them 30 on Oriental Bay, even though the traffic can go at 40? And of course, I'd think the Oriental Bay traffic should go at 30 anyway. But
and if the user was confident to be out in the road with traffic at 30, they were able to do so.
Yeah.
Or come onto the footpath at a slower speed with pedestrians.
Right. Okay.
And they would have that choice. At the moment, they don't have a choice. They're either on the road or on the footpath at 15.
And is it safe to go at 30k on a narrow board with some handlebars? What's the evidence around that? They must have internationally.
I'm not sure I can answer that.
Councillor Free, but Iota, there is a lot of information in the report about accident rates.
Councillor, I'm wondering if Councillor Pennant would allow us to put on the pavement into her amendment to make it slightly clearer that she's actually seeking, seeking more 15-kilometre restrictions for the pavement rather than just generally. It would be very helpful.
Could we just have a 2-minute amendment just to sort out adjournment? Sorry, just to sort out Councillor Free's suggestion. I'd rather get it over the line and the officers just would that be all right?
Good. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Brown, can I just clarify that the officers have suggested that to meet Councillor Free's concern, and that was actually my intention, so that's fine. And they said that they can just look at those streets where it's quite slow, like at Ridderford and Oriental Bay. It doesn't need to be added onto the amendment, even though I'm a bit, less than enthusiastic about it.
Okay, is everyone okay? Do we need to vote on allowing this change? I don't. Okay, so is everyone okay with that? Yes. Yep, okay. I'm opposed to the amendment, but I'm willing to. No. Okay, so what happens now? I think we finished with the questions. Yeah. So now.
So we just want to clarify the change to the amendment is, sorry, it's a bit far away, including increasing officers to investigate more pedestrian areas. Yeah, cool.
Okay. So that's the end of questions. Now we move on to debate, and I think it's Councillor Chung who seconded Councillor Pannett's amendment, so he gets the first chance to speak if he wishes to. Councillor Rogers would like to speak.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Pannett, for bringing these amendments. I certainly do recognise the danger that pedestrians face from many different forms of activity that take place on our streets. And one of the things I tried to do when looking at these amendments was think not just about these two regulated companies, but also all the other modes of transport that are using our streets and the designs that we have in them. And I think the place that I came to when I also looked up some of the research as well was around how we can manage some of these effects through better design of our streets. And a lot of the things we heard were around the many objects, whether they're stationary or moving, that are occupying parts of our footpath, whether that's cyclists or the micromobility modes. I also saw some research around the imposition of speed limits, particularly on just these rideshare options on streets, and the effect that that has on the utilisation of the streets. It doesn't change the utilisation for people who own their own scooters. It doesn't impose a speed limit on them, and it also does sometimes have the effect of moving people from those pedestrian areas into other pedestrian areas. It is, I guess, something that I've seen some evidence from. I would love to see more on, and there's even research that suggests that more work needs to be done in that space around the effect of speed limits. But it's certainly something that I continue to hear anecdotally, is that instead of going along the waterfront, people are going along the streets that are parallel to it because their trip is much quicker. And the downside of that as well is that some of those streets are right onto shop fronts, so people can step out of shops in front of a scooter, where you have some of that risk is mitigated on the waterfront. And I guess I also related to this to some of the evidence around speed restrictions for private motor vehicles and people who are driving cars. And in a lot of those cases, there was a strong correlation to people's perception of risk and the speed that they travelled at, where if they saw more risk to themselves or others, they inherently moved a bit slower. And so I was also using that lens over some of these amendments. Speaking to points 10 and 11, I think it is really important that we have places that people can park these. I do think, if people are reaping the benefit of micromobility transport, there should also be some cost for that, and that comes into my discussion around paying for parking in general, regardless of what mode you're using, and how we shift people between those modes. And I also do think it's important that people who are using micromobility can use a place that is separated from people who are using footpaths. And that is ultimately where my decision around point 11 comes in. So I'm very happy to support points 10 and 11. I can see the reasoning behind number 9. I think it's got good intentions, but from what I've heard from officers, it's work that they're already investigating. And there was, I also heard some concern earlier around just particularly the wording, whether it would further just restrict some of the more broader work that they were doing down to a specific scope. So happy for the officers to continue their work. So it'll be a no, yes, yes from me.
Councillor Randall.
Thank you. So I think Councillor Pennant and Chung for bringing these amendments. I support all of them, and the reason I support 10 and 11 are exactly as outlined by Councillor Rogers. Pretty obvious sort of things. Point 9, now that has been clarified to be focused on pedestrian areas, I think is appropriate. We are really, in a sense, being too focused as well in dealing with this under the e-scooter banner. We should be talking about our policy in pedestrian areas, and it's really important that we treat pedestrian areas with special care because, there's lots of pedestrians and lots of people, particularly disabled, elderly and such like, are already a bit challenged about getting out and about, and the last thing we want to do is have them have an increased level of fear because of our inability to control the speed of e-scooters in these areas. So while I take I disagree with Councillor Rogers' points that we shouldn't have this focus. I think it's the role of this committee to give good direction to officers about what is prioritised, and I think it is important, and I ask Councillor Rogers and others to reconsider their votes perhaps to say that this gives good direction towards making sure that any future code of conduct utilises this new technology level, new generation of technology to make a safer environment, to actually ask officers to make sure that they are leveraging the ability of these new scooters to make both the pedestrian space safer and also encourage them to work in the corridor where confident riders should be riding, and so that we can grow this. I mean, at the moment there's still a bit of a novelty. New technology, as we've seen with electric cars and electric buses, it takes a while to come to pass, and we are learning, and we want a city that embraces this. And so I really think that Councillor Pennant gives good direction to the officers to make sure that it is a key element to our future code of conduct for e-scooters to have pedestrian areas become safer at the same time as we can enable greater use of the micromobility in the cycle lanes where they are and in other spaces. With all due respect, I do, hopefully you'll take on my points and the others will too, and I encourage you to vote for all three of these. Thank you.
I'm just going to be very brief because I do want to speak to the main substantive when it comes back to us. But I think, actually, Councillor Rogers, you always speak really well, and I agree with you in some ways about number 9. I'm going to definitely support 10 and 11. But I do thank Councillor Pennant for being open to just inserting a descriptor which makes it much clearer what we're trying to achieve with this. I have thought about what you've said, and I will support 9 because it's really true that we're not in control of all scooters because of the private component, but we are still setting a tone for what's expected through what we can do. And I do think it's important. We've got a city where a lot of people walk. About 30% of our population regularly walk to work, which is very, very high. And I think it is important that we do show, and maybe this is a bit of a signal rather than changing anything the officers will actually do, although we hope they will take some heed of it. But I think it's important that we bear in mind that there is that huge population of people who walk. They do deserve us to be thinking somewhat about how we can make that experience safer and more pleasant for them. And hopefully that will create a way of behaving which will be recognised by private scooters riders as well.
I'll give myself the last word then. I support Councillor Rogers' comments. I feel like the problem about creating more onerous regulation of the regulated scooters is that, of course, there's a pretty good chance we're just going to squeeze some people out into the unregulated space and have a directly perverse effect in terms of pedestrian perceptions. Remember that this is only an issue of perception. The scooter companies have had one complaint about moving scooters every 26 days. Obviously, the scooters are not, when they're moving, are not perceived to be a major problem. Creating an unnecessary burden on our officers to, effectively sort of go into a new space and get slightly convoluted about the way they regulate the scooters, I don't feel like that's actually a plus at all. So I feel that letting the officers work with the scooter companies as they are at present seems to have been tremendously efficient. I mean, all of the feedback we had from the scooter companies about the new technologies they're introducing with the cameras that will actually sense pedestrians, etc., all of those things indicated to me that we're heading in the right direction, and I don't feel like this is a necessary or desirable outcome, because I feel that it could create perverse outcomes, and the unintended consequence could well be more people on scooters which aren't regulated at all. Now it's for Councillor Pettit to have the right of reply. And Ray, if he wishes to talk.
Great, thank you. Yes, it's very unusual for me to talk, but yeah. I had a discussion about this with Councillor Rogers this morning about the speed on the waterfront and how the slower speed is actually is a disincentive for them to ride along there and then take adjacent roads. But I've been thinking about that quite a lot, and I think that from my view, the pedestrian is sacrosanct, and so there are a lot of people on the waterfront who walk on the waterfront. There are a lot of families, there are a lot of people who walk their dogs, and dogs are, as we know, are more important than children. And so I think it's very, very important for us to protect those. So, and I think that if the scooter riders think that that's too slow, then no, and they'll choose to use another road, I think that that's fine, and they know what they're doing, and they can look after themselves on these other roads. But a lot of the younger children, families can't, they don't know if there's a scooter coming up behind them. So I think that's much more important to restrict that sort of speed along the waterfront, because it's such a great place for all sorts of people to go. And so regarding the complaint once every 26 days, I'm actually very surprised at that, because I reckon I make one complaint every 26 days. And so I must be the one making all the complaints. So I haven't kept track of when I do it, but I think I will from now on, because I feel that I actually see them, at least once a week whenever I'm out and I see scooters there, and I like to report them when they're in places that I think they shouldn't be, or they're blocking a footpath. So I think there's no issue with 10 and 11, but 9 is actually, I think it's very important as well, because I think it's very important for us to allow as many people as possible to feel safe, either when they're walking or riding or any other mode of transport. So I would urge all of you to vote for this. Thank you.
Councillor Pettit.
Thank you for all your considered responses. So I do urge you to support these. I think it's actually really important. We have now for many years said that walking is the top of our sustainable transport hierarchy. It's not cycling or scooters. It's certainly not cars. And so we really just need to back up pedestrians. And I don't agree that the number of complaints actually means that it's a safe environment. There are, like, half of our people who have responded to a survey don't want them there because they don't feel safe. And as I reminded a former mayor of the city, it is a place of privilege to be not scared in the transport space. If you haven't travelled with children or disabled people or with older people, it can be quite hard to kind of just intellectually kind of just not understand and experience it as directly yours. And this is the same for everything in anything in the world. And so, my priority here is about giving voice and protection to those who don't want basically a vehicle on the street. And I do feel that as a society we are a little bit overly tolerant towards the number of deaths and serious injuries on our roads and our footpaths. So, of course, Councillor Rogers, thank you for your points. Of course, I would agree with redesigning our streets completely. I mean, the roads need to be gone after, motorways including, and there are lots of dangers on our footpaths. But we are talking about wheeled vehicles at 30k, even if that's not how they're legally defined. We know that with cars, when we slow them down, it's safer. And that's why I put last trinium, we're not finished with this one, radical plan to have 30k speed limits over most of the city, and we need to keep going with that because that is the safest thing we can do. And it's exactly the same argument when you move on to the footpaths. And actually, I do want the lower speeds on the roads to protect the cyclists and the scooterists really, really strongly on that. So we can't say we should have slower speeds on the roads to protect people, but not slower speeds on the footpaths. They are a slow speed zone. They are about a 5 kilometre an hour area. I don't agree that it will just encourage people. It just means that people know that they need to be really, really careful, and that's why we work on building our cycle network and we lower the speeds overall as a city. I just don't believe that. I actually quite like regulation as a general rule. It's quite a good thing because it protects those who are vulnerable. And so basically the scooter companies get a good deal. They get a whole network that's been built over many, many years. So I think a little bit of regulation to protect vulnerable users is absolutely appropriate. Last point, just say, to be collaborative, I have agreed to a massive compromise with putting pedestrian areas around there because actually I just want every area to be safe, and I think Elwood would be much better. But I do appreciate people giving me feedback and trying to work with people. So I hope you'll support all of these, and if we could take a division on them. Thank you.
Jolly good, thank you very much. We finally get a chance to vote. So shall we do 9 separate, and then we'll do 10 and 11 together? Is that okay? Everyone's okay with that? Okay, let's do that. So we're voting on number 9 at this point first. I get 2 votes, right?
Tim, it's Liz here.
Hi, Liz.
Hey, I don't know, how do you say no? It's only got to put your hand up.
Oh, you type it in the chat, apparently, Liz.
Okay, cool. That's it. Thank you.
But we'll give you a red. Let's assume Liz is a red.
Yeah, I'm a red.
Oh, you failed on that one, Iona. So now we're voting on 10 and 11 together. Yep, Nico, we're still waiting for you. Yep, okay, that is passed. Thank you. So we do get that. So now we go back to the substantive. So we go back into debate. So does anybody wish to debate the? We've got one comment over here, and then Councillor Randall.
So we're back to the substantive. I just wanted to quickly speak about my role as councillor with the Accessibility Advisory Group, and this issue does come up as a topic of concern regularly, alongside other changes to the road layout. And I just want to acknowledge that those changes are much more challenging for disabled people. And as councillor on that group, my approach has been to try and ease the way, to make it easier to get questions answered and to open up channels of communication. So, but then when I move into my governor role, I think I take those views into account while taking other information into account, which is provided to us. And therefore I support the continuation of the scheme. I want to thank Councillor Free for her amendment, and because I think that what I've been able to say when we've discussed this, and the council view largely at the Accessibility Advisory Group is that accessibility and the impact on disabled people of micromobility is quite central to our concerns, and that we want to continue to increase that voice and to make it easier and more impactful for people to have their say. I guess I just want to say that, you know, I do also think we make these changes in the real world, and that includes in smaller suburban streets. And, you know, my street is never going to have a bike lane. And actually, for many people, the best place on a street like mine, which there's not a lot of pedestrian traffic either, is going to be the footpath, to be honest, for younger and more nervous users of micromobility. So I think the sort of, you know, hard and fast rules don't necessarily work across the variety of spaces that we have, and that's something that we need to take into consideration as well. So yeah, just thank everybody for their work, and I've been very heartened by all of the providers who have spoken to us today about the good work they're doing. Thank you.
Councillor Randall.
Yes. So the amended the office has recommended that we go to tender, and the chair has done an amendment substantive to postpone it, and I'm in a bit of a dilemma. I do appreciate there's been some positive comments of the incumbents, but the deal was 3 years, and all the players in the market have worked towards that, and you know, changing that shouldn't be dealt with lightly. Postponing something even for it's 2 years again. Why does it say 2 years? It's supposed to be 18 months. Yes, 18 months. So postponing it for 18 months, which is the time the officers said that they could sort out the code of conduct and you know, a new code of conduct that reflects the technology improvements before we go to tender. You know, that's a decision we shouldn't make lightly. I also thank the operators who've worked damn hard to make the technology work better and to make it safer to work in the spaces that we have. And it's a bit of a shame that postponing things 18 months means we might be denying ourselves newer technology sooner. However, this is a very difficult area, and the fact is that the points made, for example, from Living Streets Aotearoa about having a code of conduct that's not only just better, but takes on board all the new technology options that are possible, and is also maybe better aligned to disability practice, disability standards, and generally aligned to the pedestrian area space that we have in Wellington, and it's a constrained space in lots of areas, means that we needed to do some work. And so the approach that Councillor Brown, who's moved the amendment, has recommended is do the code of conduct first, based on new capabilities, and then go to tender, has a soundness to it. But I have to note, and I am supporting it, but I'm supporting it quite reluctantly, because I don't like to break promises to the market. I don't like to deny some of the neat new stuff, especially like the REO, to look at that option for Wellington. And that's the price that this amended substantive is going to give to the people of Wellington. So that's where my position is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Free.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I actually feel very comfortable with where we've landed, and I'll be supporting this. And I do thank Councillor Brown, who, as chair, has done the homework and really thought about the paper that he's bringing to us this morning. I think that it is sensible. I endorse what Councillor Randall said. It's a difficult decision to decide to do, to go extend something that we had originally decided was going to be a 3-year time frame. But I actually think the current operators are continuing to show us, and the community is continuing to show us where the pitfalls are, and they're being slowly but surely ironed out. And the result is that after 18 months, and also we'll be in a stronger position to really come forward with maybe a longer term proposition for for our new operators, whoever they might be. I also think other cities are adopting this, and there's a lot to learn in the New Zealand context. The new technology we've been able to see today, it's bigger, it's heavier, that parking will be even more of an issue, dare I say it. But, there are other cities which are actually in a position to give contracts for this new technology, and we can learn a lot from that and be in a really good position in 18 months to put in place the kind of contracts that we need to with the provisions we need to. Parking, it's really clear from the data we've got that it's not the moving transport problem, it's actually a parking problem. Like so many, parking is such a problem. It doesn't matter what you're doing in public space. When you stop and a person takes over a piece of public space for a time, it's an issue. And I don't think we've totally solved it. I was very concerned at the point that was raised by Ms. Blake around the way that scooters are parked currently against the boundary of properties might actually be very detrimental for people who are using canes. And I think we need to take that seriously. I think the staff have picked up on that. We do need some more feedback from the disability community, because I'm not to say what those issues might be. Have we actually got it right? Should we be providing, parking against power poles, or, some other way which might make it easier for our disability community? We definitely, this is the area of this whole issue that we really need to focus on and get really right. And I think another 18 months will be helpful.
And Councillor Chung.
At the risk of sounding like a councillor who sits on the fence and saying, I don't know which way to go, I'm actually looking at this, and I agree with Councillor Brown about giving surety to companies to extend their time so that they can actually adapt to the new code of compliance, code of conduct. However, I was on the waterfront yesterday looking at the new technology that was coming out, and I'm very impressed that it actually addresses all my concerns about e-scooters. That is where they were actually left, so that they can actually remotely move them out of the way. And I was very impressed by that. And I think that that's going to go a long way to actually removing the danger and impediments on footpaths. The other one about my other concern about the scooters sneaking up behind people and scaring them or banging into them, I think that's also being addressed by the new technology or the new scooters having 4 cameras and sort of highlighting the proximity and the awareness of other people or other objects, and so and the ability for the scooter companies to actually slow those scooters down or give a warning when they're actually approaching those. So I think that's actually very important. I really think that this technology is going to be the way of all scooter companies, and so I like the way that they've already got this. I mean, I went for a ride along the waterfront. This is the first time I've been on a scooter since I was about 8 years old, which is just the other year, and so I think that we should not put impediments in front of these new companies to actually trying to introduce this technology, because I think that it'll be beneficial to all users, but especially people who are walking on the footpaths and people who actually find scooters zapping around them intimidating. So I'm going to vote against this motion. Thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
Morena. Yeah, look, I would prefer to stick with the officer's original recommendation of going to a tender. The presentations this morning have shown that there is some pretty exciting technology out there, and I think for us to delay the tender process isn't the right thing for us to be doing. To allow that to be an option, I'd have to put up an amendment that would overwrite 3 and 4, and I frankly don't have the effort to do that. So I'm going to vote against 3 and 4, and I'm just going to note from a process point of view again, getting an amended substantive and the wording 3 minutes before a meeting start is not going to ever bring me on time for support, and I would hope that we can be better in communicating the wording around this. So I'll vote for everything in the amended substantive except for points 3 and 4.
Thank you. Has anybody else got a comment? No. So how are we actually going to do this voting?
Just a comment that I think the people online may still think it's 2 years, not 18 months, just based on the recent communication.
Okay, so
thank you.
can the people who are online, do they actually see the... So just agree to extend the existing e-scooter licensing for a period of 18 months, blah, blah, blah. And then agree to commence a procurement process to issue new licenses after 1 March 2026 for a period of up to 5 years. So those are the two changes. So, but I don't feel I need to say anything additional. So now we vote. Do we vote on the whole thing?
So, yeah, but 2 for me. So probably I just got to vote for 1. I'll vote against everything else.
So you want to do 1, everything else except 3 and 4, and then 3 and 4. So should we do? Can we do that? Okay.
Sorry, you're going to take 2 separately, could that being the most important one?
Well, I think you said.
No.
We don't want to vote on every.
So I just want to.
Okay, we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4 separately, and we'll do everything else. So we'll start out with the everything else, if that's all right. Five on.
Sorry.
5 and up.
Okay.
So 5 to 11.
Sorry. I'm going to need those to be taken separately too. Sorry, there's just so many of them.
Oh, seriously?
So, yeah, no, because I want to vote against 5, but I don't want to vote against 7.
Okay. So can we just? Okay, we'll start at 1. Let's just go 1 at a time. Or can we vote to exclude? No.
And can these be all by division, please? Thank you.
Okay, so we're voting on 1. I hope your buttons don't go flat. Nico and Tori, we're waiting for you. Yep. Okay, thank you. Okay, now we're on to number 2. We're just waiting on you, Liz. Liz said yes. Okay. Okay. So now, that passed. Sorry. So 1 and 2 have both passed. Now we move on to number 3. Terry, you're the holdout this time. You're there. It has passed 12. Yep. 4. Terry, you're the sticky button again. That is also passed. Number 5. That is also passed. Number 6. That is also passed. Number 7. That is also passed unanimously. Number 8. That is also passed. Number 10. It lost. It got knocked out. That was the one that, yeah. This was Iona's one.
Renumber just for sense because it's been knocked out. Just, yeah.
No, we're voting on the number 10 is in the thing here anyhow. That's unanimous. And number 11. The written, you're the holdout. It's also unanimous, thank you. That's all done and dusted with that one. So we have the action tracking and forward program, and we would like to see
Yes,
Liam
thank you,
give
Mr.
us an
Chairman.
update.
I take that as read. Happy to answer questions, just noting that Siobhan Proctor is on leave this week, so we'll take anything on the infrastructure side that I can answer on notice. Thank you.
Cool. A few quick questions, Liam. The first one is this action tracking being updated? If so, what is happening with the half-cost policy? The consultation is finalized. Does that mean it's coming back for decision, or is it just going to be?
Through Mr. Chairman, yes. So hearings, I believe, are next week, and then decision thereafter.
Okay. The second question is regards to Resolution ID 801. On September 15, 2022, Council requested to report economic impact of on businesses regards to the cycle lane from Newtown to the city. That was meant to be reported in the first 6 months, and I wonder what's happening with that since it's already more than 6 months now.
Sure, I might get Paul to come and talk to that.
Thanks, Councillor. I missed the first part of the question. What were you asking to report back? It has been more than 6 months for that Newtown to the city.
Economic impact of that to be reported back in 6 months after consultation, and I wonder if that time.
Yeah, so it's not a project I'm fully across, but I am aware that the team have been collecting the information. They're just going through their final wrap-up phase. There is a report coming, I believe a report back to committee coming up in the next week or so. We're trying to gather some data for that, so I will ask that any available information be included in that, and then we'll update in the fullness of time the outcome of the economic impact report.
One last question. That one is related to Let's Get Wellington Moving. A lot of amendment motion was passed back in 2022, and they are still in action tracking. And since that is a bit of an issue now, what are we doing in addressing some of those amendments?
Thanks for your question, Councillor. Through you, Mr. Chairman, I think you'll note, councillors, I've retired some of those actions from Let's Get Wellington Moving. You'll notice that in the action section. Also the email, of course, we sent to councillors, I think I sent it actually earlier this week, explaining the merging of the City Streets program from Let's Get Wellington Moving and some of the bike network. That is the latest update I can provide to councillors.
Thank you.
Liam, the Whaitua process, enormous resources put into that. Are we able to actually make some more progress?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. And through you, Mr. Chairman. The meeting actually I had about a month ago now with the Greater Wellington Regional Council manager, who is now looking after that process, has indicated to me that there's a restart underway. So as soon as I have more information about what that looks like and when we can participate in tracking the actions and adding to them, if you like, I'll provide an update to councillors.
Okay, that would be helpful. And just the numbers of homes inspected by our little rental service. Are you going to provide some numbers next time we have a housing report?
Yes, the housing action plan's due August now. You'll notice that in the updated sections as well. So that will provide an update on the rental inspection program we're running.
Is it going well?
I believe so. I think the response, given the resources we have been quite solid, and the outcomes of which we'll report in August.
Councillor Randall.
I note the next meeting, which is in June, we're way off, includes the collections and organics options and update report. Can someone outline a little bit more detail about what that report covers? Because there's all sorts of things happening in that space.
As I said, Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, without Siobhan here, I'm unable to provide that update, but happy to email us something through to councillors. I'll talk to Chris Matthews later this afternoon. We'll get something out to you.
Okay, thank you.
My apologies.
Councillor Free.
Thank you, and I got momentarily distracted, so forgive me if this question's been asked already. The submission to GW's LTP, that's my first one, and the second one is we've helpfully received an email update on the Cycleway projects, but are we going to be able to have a workshop or some face-to-face where we can ask questions about that?
Okay, through you, Mr. Chairman. So the first question, yes, there is a draft submission prepared. I've got a verbal extension from Greater Wellington Regional Council to lodge that, and it's been circulated under non-committee delegation, similar to how we did the GPS for transport. The second question, yes, is the answer. We do intend either together with Greater Wellington councillors and the Public Transport Improvement Program, have briefings with jointly or otherwise with councillors.
Can I just ask, because we've been waiting quite a few months now, can I just actually ask that we have one with just our council first, so we can ask, the sort of questions we might not want to put you on the spot answering in front of another set of councillors?
Okay, I can look into that, councillor. I think Greater Wellington were keen to getting the two groups together, but I can...
it's a good idea, but maybe as well.
Sure,
yeah. Thank you.
That looks like the end. So I'll move the motion that we accept the report. Is there a seconder? Looks like Councillor Matthews. Can we vote on that? Is it no debate? No?
No, we don't.
That has passed. We'll just have our karakia, and that will be the end of the meeting. Please join me. If I can find it. Oh, we do here.
Kia ora.
Akibama. Thank you.